Welcome aboard the night flight. This is your captain speaking. I go by the name of Hatman. And your entertainment for this journey will be provided by none other than myself by way of a conversation, a dialogue, a discourse with you guys. So, shout out to everybody in the live chat, first and foremost. We'll call some names here. Some early birds. We got Team Batman Boxing, yes. We got Anthony YouTube, of course. We got Jake Jones. We got KD. Michael Ortega. It's as if the format of some of you guys' names has changed to something weird for some reason in the chat room here. It's like the names are the same, but the format has changed all weird. But anyway, on tonight's flight, I really want to talk about music. We can talk about anything you guys want, but I really want to talk about music. Any kind of music you guys want to talk about. It don't matter whether it's black music, white music, Chinese music, Indian music, flipping Eskimo music, whatever. Let's talk about some music stuff. We haven't talked about music in a while. For those of you who don't know, I have really eclectic taste when it comes to, well, let me not say really eclectic, fairly eclectic taste when it comes to music, because there are some people that are far more eclectic than me with their music taste. But, I like a fairly wide variety of music, particularly when it comes to older stuff. Great Man says, are we going to get some Pastor Semper videos in the background today? I'm not sure I've got them loaded up in OBS. Do I? I'm just scrolling through now to see if I've got them loaded up. Nah, you're not in luck. I don't have the Pastor Semper videos loaded up right now. But I'll definitely bring those back. Pastor Semper and Simon Kagwangela, the greatest interviewer in television history, asking the most pertinent questions. Shout out to Jake Jones. He says, Hatman, if Atama loses to White, what level of upset would you call it? More than AJ Ruiz? Obviously not a Tyson Douglas. I don't think it'd even be as big as AJ Ruiz, to be honest. I mean, it all depends on the individual, right? But I don't think the public at large know enough about Atalma. I don't think enough of the public know who he is for it to be a bigger upset than Ruiz beating AJ. Do you know what I mean? Atalma's more so known within the boxing hardcore. He is filtering out to the general public to some extent, but he's nothing like the star AJ was at that time. So I don't think it would be as big as Ruiz beating AJ. And also, Atama's just a prospect. He's not like he's a world champion. Prospects get beat. It happens. All right, Dog Boone has got a merciful question here, because normally I'm getting questions about Margaret Thatcher or Greta Thunberg. Those are the kind of sadistic questions I get. Dog Boone says, Britney or Christina? I guess you mean Christina Aguilera. Then I'd go with Christina Aguilera over Britney Spears. If I have to pick out one of those two, yeah. Great Man says, what do you think the Diddy verdict is going to be? It's an interesting one, because I actually saw an interview with Suge Knight. Suge Knight is talking more now that he's in prison than he ever did when he was on the outside. And he used to talk a bit on the outside, obviously, but because he ain't got nothing better to do at the moment, all he's doing is calling up, what's that guy called now? What's the channel called? The Art of Dialogue channel. And he's doing interviews on there damn near every day, it seems. In fact, he had his own podcast from prison a while back, Suge Knight. And he did an interview on the Art of Dialogue channel the other day where he thinks that Diddy, if he goes to prison at all, is only going to get convicted on one of the more minor charges and that he won't do much time. And he was absolutely adamant about it, Suge Knight. And he says his reason for thinking this is because, according to him, Diddy has been a confidential informant for the American government for years. And for that reason, they're going to let him off. But, well, if not let him off, then give him a very light sentence in the end. But, I don't know, what if he's upset the wrong people within the American government? Do you know what I mean? Within the American establishment, should I say, because it's really deeper than government. If he's upset the wrong people, then far from going easy on him, they might make an example of him. So I don't know, is my answer. I've got no idea whether he's going to get off or this, that, or the other. I've got no idea. But what do you think? Yes, big up the Celtic Magician. If everyone can hit the like button, be much appreciated. C-Biz says, Hatman, did you hear about the 92-year-old convicted after 58 years, mad thing in the UK? I think I read something about that. Like, I might have read the headline, but I don't know what the story's about. Enlighten me. Tell me about it. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. Jay Jones says, what's the temperature where you are, Hatman? It was early 30s here today. Yeah, it's about the same here. But for whatever reason, and I've never heard a scientific explanation which is satisfactory to me, but 30 degrees when you're close to the equator feels way hotter than 30 degrees in the UK. Way hotter. When the sun touches your skin in a tropical country, be it Costa Rica, Jamaica, throughout the Caribbean and so on, the sun feels significantly hotter on your skin than it ever does in the UK when it's the same temperature, like around, low 30s. Because in most tropical countries, that's the temperature pretty much all year round. It only fluctuates 3 or 4 degrees. It's around high 20s, low 30s year round. But yeah, the sun just feels much hotter on your skin. Way hotter on your skin. Is it because the sun is slightly closer because of the curvature of the earth? But then again, if that's what it is, then why would it only be 30 degrees? Why wouldn't it be a higher temperature than that? Do you know what I mean? It's a weird one. Maybe it's just physics that I cannot comprehend. Shout out to Little Jacob. Shout out to Rocker. Is it Mingio? Shout out to you. Okay, C-Biz says, basically it was a grape in the red rum in Bristol in 1967. The 92-year-old man was convicted today. The case had gone cold for all these years. So how did they catch him? If it's a cold case, I mean, I have to imagine some of the officers that were involved in the initial investigation would be deceased or retired by now. So did the guy get picked up for a different crime and then I don't know. It's kind of interesting. DNA, but okay, so it was DNA, but why were they looking for the DNA? Do you know what I mean? They kept the file. So somebody decided to reopen the case. It's kind of weird, that somebody would decide to reopen such an old case. What was the impetus to reopen it? Little Jacob says, the problem with the UK is the heat isn't accompanied by a breeze. Well, no, it's extremely humid here. Especially in the rainy season, it's far more humid than it gets. If you think the UK humidity is bad, yeah, don't come here, especially in rainy season. Because the humidity will knock you off your feet. And actually, the most humid place I've ever been in my entire life is, well, certain parts of the Middle East. The humidity is insane. Absolutely insane. particularly places like Bahrain, Qatar in the summer. The humidity, absolutely insane. By far the most humid places I've ever been in my life. I mean, it's like breathing soup. That's how humid it was over there. Unbelievable, during just incredible humidity. Far hotter than any humidity you'll ever feel in Britain, trust me. So no, here it's humid. Here it's humid. In rainy season like now, it's very humid here. But I'm not talking about the humidity. I'm talking about the actual feeling of the sun on your skin. 30 degrees or low 30s in Britain, the sun on your skin doesn't feel as hot as the sun on your skin in Costa Rica. It just doesn't feel as hot. I have no idea why, but that's just how it is. And if you experience it, you understand what I mean. In the Caribbean, in tropical countries, the sun on your skin literally feels like it's sizzling your skin. You don't get that effect in Europe, even when it's the same temperature. Shout out to Mr. Luca. He says, saw an article saying Usyk was getting 130 million for Daniel Dubois. Yeah, I've seen the same information. And personally, I don't buy it. I don't think he's getting that much money. Gareth A. Davis, who, yeah, we all clown him and what have you, he is an insider. He does have inside information. And he also was very skeptical about that number. He says he doesn't think they're getting anywhere near that amount of money. And you have to bear in mind that Terence Crawford was reportedly getting, what did they say, 50 million or 40 million for Canelo? But then he went on, I think it was a podcast with Akam Barak, and he said he's only getting 10 million or somewhere in that region. So the report, if Terence Crawford's telling the truth, then the reported figure he was getting in the press was like 5 times higher than what he claims he's actually getting. I find it very difficult to believe that Usyk's getting 130 million for that fight. I mean, the Saudis are involved, but I don't think the Saudis just want to pay money for the sake of paying money. Do you know what I mean? So I'm skeptical. Shout out to, is it CMMC? Mr. Lucas says he's probably getting 25 million. I reckon that's a lot closer to the reality than 130 million. Danny says Crawford was joking when he said 10 million. Okay. Cash Machine says he said 10 million for when in case the IRS are listening. Mr. Lucas said, yeah, it said 70 million for Dubois. Yeah, I just can't see them paying that type of money for a fight which isn't that big. It's a big fight, but it's not commercially what the Anthony Joshua fights against Usyk were doing, or the Fury fights, not even close. So I'll be very surprised if Daniel Dubois certainly is on anything like 70 million for this fight. I'd be amazed. All right, please do not spam the chat. CBiz says, Hatman, why did the UK give such light sentences? This same guy had committed a red rum, got his life sentence reduced to 7 years. Well, if you think the sentences in the UK are light, try South Africa, Jamaica, and some developing countries. You'd be horrified at how light some of the sentences are. Because in a lot of these developing countries, the prisons are so overcrowded, literally packing dozens of prisoners into a cell like a tin of sardines, that in order to accommodate new prisoners coming in, which they do all the time, they literally have to let people out who are on red rums, who've been convicted on red rums after 5, 6, 7 years. That happens in a lot of developing countries. People on red rums and all sorts of extremely serious charges and, convictions get let out after a few years. It's crazy. And the other end of the spectrum would be the United States, where the sentences are cartoonish. I mean, it's not unheard of at all in the United States for people to get, 300 years, 400 years. They literally hand out numbers which are many times the length of a human being's life. So that's the other end of the spectrum, right? Okay, shout out to C-Biz. Run up the likes, people. We got 82 concurrent viewers. If we can get some likes in here, much appreciated. CMMC says, what do you think of Eubank Ben rematch being announced? I picked Eubank for the first fight, but something telling me the rematch, Ben gets the stoppage. Yeah, Eubank looked very dehydrated. People noted that he wasn't sweating during the fight, which is very disturbing. It's not a rematch I wanted to see, to be honest. I'm kind of disappointed. But then again, I didn't really want to see the first fight. Yes, it turned out to be good, but I would have preferred to see Conor Ben pursue world honors at 147 pounds. To me, that's more interesting, especially now that Boots Ennis has moved up. I would have found it far more interesting to see Conor Ben pursue world titles at welterweight. There's an opportunity there right now for Conor Ben because the welterweight division is pretty weak as things stand right now with Boots Ennis moving up. So that's what I would have preferred to see. But instead, he's fought Eubank Jr. once and it looks like he's going to fight him again. So it is what it is. Shout out to Baz. He says, Hatman, did you ever rate the movie Cool Runnings? And do you know if it was all true? Like their coach cheating when he was younger or them tripping all over at the 100-meter sprint? Cool Runnings was kind of like a corny, feel-good movie with, who was the guy in it? Was it Chevy Chase? There was a number of fat guys, American and Canadian comedy actors back then, and I kind of get them all mixed up. I think it was Chevy Chase. John Candy. There you go, see? John Candy, Chevy Chase. John Candy. Yeah, Cool Runnings. The Jamaican accents were laughable. I guess it was a okay, fun, kind of silly movie back in the days. Yeah, I'd heard it was based on a true story, but I really don't know much about the true story, truth be told. I just remember the corny song they had in there. Jamaica has a bobsleigh team. You guys remember that? Jamaica has a bobsleigh team. And all that. Great Man says, any thoughts on the outrage against Bob Dylan? I guess you meant to say it. Glastonbury? I've got no idea about it. Please enlighten me. Why were they slating Bob Dylan? I need to look up Chevy Chase now. Okay, so that's Chevy Chase. All right. Isn't he the one that did National Lampoon? Was that Chevy Chase or was that somebody? Yeah, it was. Yeah, Chevy Chase. Okay, so Chevy Chase is the guy who used to do National Lampoon. All right. Oh, wow. So Bob Dylan chanted death to the IDF and chanted it to the Glastonbury crowd. All right. I'm surprised the Glastonbury crowd were against him. Aren't they quite like left-wing leaning, the Glastonbury lot? I don't know. Maybe I'm way off. Because normally the lefties in the UK anyway are really like anti that country. Oh, my bad. It's not Bob Dylan. It's a guy called Bob Villain. I see. So it's like a play on the name Bob Dylan. Bob Villain. I see. I understand. Okay. All right. Okay, somebody said the crowd liked it. All right, so where's the controversy come from? The media? So Bob Villain, oh, it's a punk duo. Okay. The crowd chanted along with him, I see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Okay, the crowd were with him, the media were having a fit. I see. Because I want to say, and this is just me, you know, giving my impression, but I want to say that particular country is far less popular among the general public in the UK than it is with the general public in America. From my experience anyway. The general public in the UK really don't particularly like that country. Some people do, obviously, but I don't know. My perception is the general public in the UK, that particular country, it's not popular with them. Whereas in America, there's a lot more support for that particular country. Shout out to Amali. Because up until 2022, I thought your username was HatmanStrikesBack. Okay. You know, I came up with the HatmanStrikesBack name because the original channel was just called Hatman. All right, someone says the BBC are not showing the performance on iPlayer. So, presumably, this individual, this artist, is somewhat talented. Is that a wrong assumption to make? If they were booked for Glastonbury, then they must be like somewhat popular, right? And what genre is it? Did somebody say a punk band or punk rock band? Mr. Lucas says the BBC aired it. All right, and then I guess didn't want to show a replay of it or whatever. Afro punk. Wow, okay, that's not a genre I'm familiar with. Afro punk. Okay, Bexy says he's talented for today's low impulse audience. Poca Rocker says, what's your opinion on Jake Paul wanting to become world champion? Everybody's got to have a dream, right? Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Everyone's got to have a dream, so good luck to him. If he wants to give it a go, why not? You only live once, as far as we know. Anybody believe in reincarnation? TM says, I don't know Hatman. I hadn't heard of them before. But they're very edgy. Had a song with lyrics like, oh, you want my country back. Shut the F up. Okay. Does Jake Paul have a chance against Badou Jack at this stage? I would make Badou Jack a 65% favorite against Jake Paul. I don't think Badou Jack is quite over the hill enough for Jake Paul to be beating him. I don't think so. So I'd give Jake Paul maybe a 35% chance against Jack, and that might be generous, to be honest. I would expect Badou Jack to win that fight. Cash Machine says that's quite low. Yeah, it might actually be a bit low. But still, I'll be picking Badou Jack to win. And Marley says, did you watch the UFC card on the weekend, night and day, compared to the boxing? I didn't, no. I heard that one of the main fights was over very quickly. People are calling for Jake Paul versus Badou Jack. I'd actually rather see Jake Paul run it back with Tommy Fury, or, as weird as it is to some people, Jake Paul versus Johnny Fisher. Yeah, Jake Paul versus Johnny Fisher. Let's see that. Yeah, I was wondering that. as well. I mentioned it at the start of the stream. Why has YouTube changed everybody's name into their usernames instead? I've got no idea. It's very weird and it's annoying because these usernames are more difficult to read than the normal names that are used. So that's quite annoying. And some of the usernames are different to the other names that you use. So some of you guys have forgotten your normal names that you use. I'm reading out these usernames. It is annoying. I'm not sure what's going on there with YouTube doing that. Shout out to Strangingness. His name is normal. There's a couple of people whose maybe their usernames are the same as their screen names or however, display name, however you want to describe it. Tossermans is the same as well. He says, BKFC did a big event in Birmingham this weekend. Frankie Gavin got knocked out in the first round. Wow. Okay, people are saying he took a dive. I'd have to have a look at that. Fun Time Frankie. I never rated that nickname. Fun Time Frankie. Sounds like a rent boy. Oh, Mr. Chainsaw, of course, yeah, the Skull and Crossbones. Shout out to Baz. Okay, Mr. Chainsaw. You know, I was actually having a conversation with somebody. An African person. And they were telling me about some of the... I say this because this guy's called Mr. Chainsaw, right? Makes you think of macabre things. I was having a conversation with an African person who was telling me about some of the bizarre customs and rituals that they have in their culture. Totally bizarre stuff. And one of them, which I was talking about, which the very early pharaohs did in ancient Egypt and also in Nubia, an ancient custom where when a king died, when a pharaoh died, his favorite servants would be buried alive with him. And I've heard that in West Africa, this still goes on. That when certain chiefs die, they bury the chief with their favorite servants alive. And the person I spoke to today is actually from Southern Africa. And they said, without me telling them, you know, about the custom, they said that same thing goes on with certain chiefs in rural areas in Southern Africa as well. When they die, they bury their servants with them. Very weird stuff. Hyro says, Paul doesn't beat Ratman Jr. I remember they had a sparring session which they were arguing about, and there was some talk that they might actually fight, but it never came to pass. Ratman Jr. and Jake Paul. Cash Machine says, Ratman Jr. got sparked by an asthmatic former NFL and UFC fighter. Yeah, that guy was called, I always forget his name, but he's not very good. He was in BKB and he got sparked out himself. Some big black American guy with dreadlocks. I forget his name. Greg Hardy, thank you. Amali, that's right, Greg Hardy. Someone's saying AJ will be buried with Eddie. Strangingness says a lot of esoteric occultism is shared throughout cultures and time. Yeah, a lot of it is, but that particular one, the burying of live servants with the king, that seems to be an exclusively African thing. I haven't heard of it happening outside of the continent of Africa. I mean, maybe it has, but it seems to be more of an African thing, because it's the only continent where I've heard about that custom. Shout out to CMMC. Yeah, I'm not aware. I mean, human sacrifice is everywhere. That's found on every continent, certainly in the ancient world. But that particular custom, the weird thing of burying live servants with the king, I'm not aware of that outside of Africa. And if it was going on outside of Africa, you know, maybe it was far less prevalent. Because that's something that's found going back thousands of years in Africa, throughout the continent. Little Jacob says, Hatman, do you still play video games? And if so, have you seen the new Death Stranding game? Not really these days. I don't play much. Funny enough, the older I get, the more I tend to play like simple games. So I downloaded this really simple game called Prison Simulator. No, Prison Architect, excuse me, Prison Architect. Because there are quite a few prison games. And so it must have been a year or two ago I downloaded Prison Architect. Yeah, Prison Architect. You basically build a prison and then you have to manage the prison and build cells and obviously make contingencies for the different gang problems and prison escapes, all this type of business. All right, Cash Machine has played it as well. Death Stranding looks a bit too techers for me. Bit too techers. Shout out to Mazzoline. Okay. DJ Slicks, long time. Big up, big up. Kylie says, Hatman the screw. Yes. Shout out to Lord McCormick for the super chat. It says, apologies, sent the message before adding the super. Let me, where was your message? Can I find it here? You might have to repeat it. Where is it? Oh, there we go. The Jimmy's 28 years later, literally a cult of Jimmy Savile. Is that what they actually are supposed to be, a Jimmy Savile cult? When you going to cook on it? Brilliance from Danny Boyle. Well, the last Night Flight live stream I did, which is still up, I actually talked all about it on that one. So if you just go back one live stream before this, it was a live stream dedicated to talking about all the films I've watched so far this year. And I talked quite extensively about 28 years later, because I saw that recently. And 28 years later, yeah, at the end, you got the how did somebody describe him the other day? Jimmy Savile ninjas or something. The Jimmy Savile ninjas. Shout out to Lord McCormick. Yes. So we've got one person who played Prison Architect. Anybody else played it? No? No one fancied themselves as a screw? No one tried out Prison Architect? Strungingness has never heard of it. It's an engrossing game once you get into it. Like, it's fairly simple, but I mean, I say fairly simple, but when it comes to like managing a prison, it gets quite techers. Yeah, it's kind of like Sims, but a prison version of Sims. It's something like that. That's right. The gangs can get out of control. A riot kicks off and you end up losing loads of your staff. You know, they get killed in the riot. Some of your staff can get bribed by prisoners. So they're smuggling contraband and what have you. KD says Assassin's Creed is beautiful. Yeah, I never really got into the Assassin's Creed games. Little Jacob says Resident Evil 4 Remake is my favorite game. Cobzilla says Jimmy is the first vampire from Sinners. Same actor. Oh, okay. They've made him up very differently, so I definitely didn't recognize that it was the same actor. Amali says, is it weird that I follow traffic rules in GTA? That is pretty weird. Mazzaline says, would love to hear you do a review on the movie Blink Twice. Shows what happens to celebs at Diddy-like parties under MK Ultra. Okay. Try to check that one out. Blink Twice. Is it available on any of the streaming services? Little Jacob says, what did you name the prison, Hatman? I would have called it Belmarsh, my local slammer. I've made quite a few prisons on Prison Architect, but I did call one of them Polesmore. Polesmore is literally hell on earth. It's named after a hell on earth prison in South Africa called Polesmore. If any of you know about what's the guy's name now? John Mongrel. Dear John Mongrel. Ross Kemp once interviewed some sadistic prison gang boss in South Africa called John Mongrel. Proper sadistic individual. Combzilla says, do you allow bombing in the prison? They don't actually have that, thankfully, in Prison Architect, which I guess reduces some of the realism, right? But yeah, It don't actually have that in there. Okay, Mazeline says, Amazon Prime if you have it. Came out 2024. Stranginess says, have you ever tried to box southpaw? Because it's a mirrored stance. I find myself having to be more creative and unorthodox. Makes sense why southpaws are like that. When I was a teenager, I would always try a switch hit because these were the days of Prince Nassim, and he was a prolific switch hitter. He could punch extremely hard from both stances. So I tried that more as a teenager. But once I got into adulthood, nah, I wasn't really switch hitting like that. But as a teenager, when I was first getting into amateur boxing, yeah, I would switch hit and try all sorts of different stuff. Yeah, some people are mentioning the Human Centipede. I know the concept of the film. I've never wanted to watch it because it just sounds disgusting for no good reason. I had no motivation to watch that film. Parker Rocker says, have you ever played COD? If you have, what was your favorite Call of Duty game? Definitely Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 2 was the most fun that I ever had on COD. There was a buzz around Call of Duty at that time. And I know subsequent games have sold more, but the buzz wasn't the same. And it was also, I want to say, the pinnacle of the COD YouTube community was right around Modern Warfare 2 in terms of the characters that were around in those days. You know, El Presador, Only Use Me Blade, Chris Smooth, many other guys. What age did I leave home? I left home like for the first time when I was maybe 18, 19, somewhere around there. But I had a brief stint back home a few times. It weren't like I just left home and never went back. I want to say I left home maybe 17, 18, I don't know, somewhere between 17 and 19. I would have left home then for a while, but then I had to go back. And then eventually left again. So it was like that. And was I told to leave? I wasn't told to leave, but I was made to feel uncomfortable. Let's just put it that way. Shout out to Striker. Big up Striker in the chat. Cash Machine says the No Russian mission was so crazy. It was an international news story. Yeah, there was an option to actually skip that section of the game, which is kind of weird. Striker says, I'm not getting notifications when these go live. Yeah, a lot of people are not. It's quite annoying. Mateo says, we are awaiting the Diddy verdict. Is it today? The Diddy verdict? Danny says, do women have it easier than men in 2025? In the West? Hell yes. In the West, women are playing life on easy mode. And they're still not satisfied. You know, they don't have it easy enough, and it's already easy enough for them. Chainsaw says, was that the airport mission? No Russian? Yes, that was. Correct. It was. Mazaline says, what's your take on the, is it Labubu dolls? I haven't heard of them. How did my parents make it uncomfortable for me? Just the energy that they were coming with, constantly complaining about stuff I was doing in the house. Do you know what I mean? Like little things, and if it didn't wash up my plate fast enough to start, it's like just weird stuff. Like I barely finished eating, and you're talking about why is that plate there? Do you know what I mean? You're a grown adult. You don't want to be hearing stuff like that. It was OTT. Did I used to do boxing? If so, did you properly compete, or was it more for training? No, I properly competed as an amateur. Wacko Jacko says, do you think it's surprising that De La Hoya was never involved in a Diddy party? Seems he would love some baby oil parties. Well, Diddy certainly is not the only person throwing those kind of parties in the United States. There'll be many, many other Diddys who are not being prosecuted right now. He's just one of them that, for whatever reason, has been thrown to the wolves. B-Tech Grind, big up. He says, have you seen any Shane Meadows films? He did This Is England and Dead Man's Shoes. I think he's overrated in the UK. I don't think the improv style does the stories justice a lot of the time. I haven't seen any of those films. No, I can't say I've seen them. Parker Rocker says, why did you stop competing? A mixture of injuries and work. I was working so much just to put a roof over my head and clothes on my back. I found it very difficult to actually work for people. I used to suffer bouts of insomnia. I'm somebody that doesn't like sticking to a rigid structure. And that's one of the reasons I hated school. I hate the regiment and routine of school. I hated the regiment and routine of school. And I hated the regiment and routine of being an employee, having to wake up the same time every day and basically plan my whole life around working for some company. And yeah, I was terribly unhappy doing that. I used to suffer insomnia, and that would obviously interfere with my training, so on and so forth. And once I got into my, late 20s and I suffered a dislocated shoulder at one point, I just kind of drifted away from it. Strangingness says, I'm struggling to sleep right now. Well, hopefully I can be boring enough to help you out. Boring or relaxing enough. How did I escape that life? Any advice? Monetize your hobbies. That's my advice. Whatever your hobbies are, in this day and age with the internet, there is a way to monetize them. So monetize your hobbies. Shout to Ruz B. Troller says, turn on an Okoli fight. is it Johnny Ondon says, Hatman, were you a full-time doorman or did you get to pick your hours? Well, both. I was a full-time doorman, but I still got to pick some of my hours. No, I got to pick my hours because I worked for several different companies. The first company, I was just told when I was working. The second company, I was with them from the inception of their company. So I was like a day one doorman for them. And because of that, I was actually headhunted, believe it or not. Because the guy who started the company was somebody that used to attend the same boxing gym as me. And so he actually headhunted me at the gym and said, I want you to come work for my company as a bouncer or whatever. And so he, in trying to convince me to come work for him, because I was working for a different company at the time, he basically said, you can pick your hours, you can, whichever venue you want to work at, we'll give you the pick of the best venues and all this type of business. Was I with G4S? No, I never worked for G4S. Amali says Qatar Airways or Turkish Airlines. Qatar all day. Qatar's the best airline I've ever flown with. My favorite airline, easily, is Qatar. Mazzaline says Okoli is low-key hilarious in his recent interviews of late. Yeah, for the past, I want to say, year, he's been hilarious. And also, Lawrence Okoli did an interview that was released in the past couple of days on the Frank Warren channel, Queensbury Promotions channel. And it's actually a really good interview, an interesting interview. I found it interesting. And dare I say it, inspiring. Because one of the things I've always liked about Lawrence Okoli, in terms of his personality and whatever, is the fact that unlike 99% of particularly black fighters from the inner city, he isn't coming with some old cliche, I was a roadman, some fake roadman background. Lawrence Okoli's not coming with any of that cliche stuff. I was a roadman and no, none of that. Lawrence Okoli in the interview was saying that he was basically a fat, goofy kid who got bullied every day for years and he was too scared to fight back. And that was his life, like year in, year out, going to school, getting bullied all the time. Until one day, he was in class and one of his bullies threw a book in his face. Literally a book in his face. And he said it hit him in the eye. And that's the moment he snapped. He had enough. he snapped and he got into a fight with this bully, a guy who'd been tormenting him for the longest time. And he didn't really say what happened with that bully, but he said that somebody who witnessed the fight encouraged him to go down to a boxing gym. And that's where his journey started. But even after that, he was a McDonald's worker. So he wasn't some guy with a roadman background and I was hustling and I was in the streets. And even O'Hara Davis, you know what O'Hara Davis is like. And he's always telling everybody he had this roadman background. I know someone who knows O'Hara Davis personally, somebody from Hackney. And look, people talk a lot of rubbish, but this individual and his brother were really in the streets. And the guy bigged up O'Hara Davis and said O'Hara was like a monster in the gym, but he was never like that in the streets. He was never no kind of roadman. So this guy was just telling me, the guy from Hackney telling me, I don't know why O'Hara's always talking this roadman stuff because he was never like that. Lawrence Okoli has never tried to come with, a fake roadman persona. And I appreciate that. He just kept it honest and said, look, I was a fat kid who got bullied. I worked at McDonald's And I watched AJ in the Olympics, and I was inspired by that to pursue my boxing dream. So that's the refreshing thing about the Lawrence Okoli story. There's no like fake tough guy background. Callie says Okoli was probably a really big kid, not the best person to pick on. Yeah, he was big, but he was like big, fat, and goofy. He said he wasn't a very good athlete or anything like that in school. And he was kind of a person that lacked confidence. So even though he was big, people used to pick on him same way. And there were guys like that in school. There were some guys who were really big, but they were like shy and people used to pick on them and whatever. And so, yeah, for Okoli, it was the same. What boxing gym in East London have I been to? A shout out to Adam for the super chat. He says, Abdullah Mason or Floyd Schofield? Floyd Schofield. Floyd Schofield. I'm quite impressed by Floyd Schofield, to be honest. His most recent performance against Tevin Farmer on the weekend, that was like his coming out party. That was impressive. He's really refined what he's doing because he can be reckless and crazy with what he does. But bear in mind, Floyd Schofield's had over 200 amateur fights. So he's not as wet behind the ears as some people think. So yeah, I go with Schofield over Mason. If they were to fight right now. Johnny Onden says Okoli is also honest with the backstory. I don't know much about Okoli's backstory. Can you enlighten us? I don't know much about it. But what do you think, Adam, about Abdullah Mason versus Floyd Schofield? Would you pick Mason right now over Schofield? KD says, ain't Okoli a prince? Yeah, I've heard that in the past. Okay, Okoli said he used to work at McDonald's. You sure it's not Okoli rather than Okoli? Because Lawrence Okoli, I pronounce his surname Okoli because I think that's the correct Nigerian pronunciation. Okoli is the one who famously worked at McDonald's. I wasn't aware of Martin Okoli working at McDonald's, but who knows? Maybe they both did. And Marley says, my knee dislocated when I was sparring 2 weeks ago. Have you ever had any big injuries when you were boxing and how did you come back? Well, yeah, dislocated knee is crazy. How did that happen? Yeah, I dislocated my shoulder when I was sparring. And my shoulder's never been the same since. Even now, my shoulder's still not the same. All these years later, my shoulder is still not the same since it was dislocated. Still not the same now. So if I lean too much on my left side, it will feel like my shoulder's popping out again. It's as if like the ligaments or tendons or whatever have been stretched in there and they haven't regained their tautness. So my left shoulder is still loose even now. And I dislocated my shoulder. God, I must have been 26 or 27. Now I'm in my mid-40s. So we're talking about nearly 20 years ago when I had that injury, and my shoulder's still not the same even now. BG says, UK going to be hotter than Barbados tomorrow, madness. Yeah, but it's like I was saying earlier on in the stream. I can assure you that if you go to Barbados when it's whatever, 30, low 30s, the sun will feel much hotter on your skin than the sun ever does in the UK. Trust me. So even though both countries might be the same temperature, somehow Barbados is way hotter. The sun feels way hotter on your skin. Little Jacob says, if Martin Okoli worked at McDonald's, I get the feeling he is still getting a staff discount. Judging by the rotundness. B-Tech Graham says, I'd rather be in Barbados. I know that. Amen. Barbados over London for sure. Johnny Unden says, I have a problem on my left arm at the elbow joint, the inner part. I was stabbed there. Can't throw left hooks and uppercuts without feeling like it's going to rip. Never healed right. A shout out to Desi for the super chat. He says, Ray Ford versus Lamont Roach at 130. Definitely Ray Ford. 100% Ray Ford. I don't think Lamont Roach is that good. I think the first Tank Davis fight flattered him. I don't think he's a solid fighter, but I don't think he's that good. So Ray Ford all day long and twice on Sunday. 7 days a week, twice on Sunday. But what do you think, Desi? Maybe you've got a totally different take than me. It's all good. We won't know for certain until if and when the two guys get in the ring and fight each other, but I would certainly take Ray Ford. I've been very impressed with Ford since he's moved up in weight. I think he was really drained when he fought Nick Ball. But since he moved up, he's got a lot more energy and spite in his punches. So I'll go to Ray Ford. That's right, AJ. Nothing like the feeling of the sun and heat licking your skin when you step off the plane on holiday. Especially when you're coming from Britain in the winter. And then you step off the plane in a warm country in your shorts and t-shirt. It's an amazing feeling. So Gans is asking for my thoughts on UFC fight over the weekend. I haven't seen it. If I do watch the fight, maybe I'll talk about it on the next live. Tosserman says, I twisted my ankle as a teen a few times, still doesn't feel strong. I'm a big guy. Maybe when you're big, it puts more strain on the body, harder to fully recover from injury. Well, certainly something like an ankle injury, if you're big, you're just going to do more damage, innit? Because you are heavier. With the shoulder dislocation, as I understand it, I always get it confused. I get it mixed up between tendons and ligaments, but whichever it is that connects bone to flesh, tendon or ligament, I think it might be the ligament, whichever one it is, when you dislocate your shoulder, they get stretched and they basically remain permanently loose. And so the way to fix it is often through surgery, Perhaps some people make a full recovery without surgery, but I personally know somebody that had the same injury, a boxer. And they went for surgery, and what they do is they shorten the tendon or the ligament or whatever and sew it together so it's shorter. And then you do a load of physio, because immediately after that procedure, the shoulder's going to feel really tight and you're not going to have the same range of motion. But after a while through physio, it will loosen up a little bit. And the shoulder should be, I don't want to say good as new, but pretty close to. But yeah, my shoulder hasn't been the same since. Stranginess says shoulders are a complex joint. Indian clubs are great to build up ligaments. Does a prime Hatman beat Jake Paul? I'd certainly hope so. If Tommy Fury beat him, I'd certainly like to think I would have beaten him in my prime. Stranginess says, I think I beat Daniel Dubois right now in my delusion. Did I see Frotch interview Crawford? No, I saw Frotch interview Canelo. I didn't see the Crawford one. And I don't watch anything that Piers Morgan is in. Does Jake Paul beat Tommy Fury right now? I'd like to find out. I reckon he might. I think he has improved a bit. And I don't think Tommy Fury has improved. Tommy Fury hasn't kept any momentum. Dazzy says, yeah, Hatman, I think Ray Ford is amazing. He's the best prospect in my opinion. Or young world champion. Yeah, he's definitely not a prospect now. But yeah, I've been very impressed with him since he moved up in weight. Ray Ford, very impressed. He's confident. He's hitting harder. He's got more energy. Yeah. I think in the lower weight classes, Ray Ford is one of the better fighters to watch. $152 concurrent viewers, only 27 likes. Damn, what did I do wrong? Can we stick a like on this stream, guys? Appreciate in advance. 152 concurrent viewers, only 27 likes. This stream is not going to get seen by any new viewers with only 27 likes on it. Yeah, somebody mentioning Tank Davis. Tank Davis is just he's insufferable, that guy. Tank Davis is just a donut, But he's enabled by his cult-like fans who are willing to pay a pay-per-view premium for all the sloppy dishes out, year in, year out. Until his weird fans stop buying his pay-per-views, he's going to continue fighting obscure opposition rather than taking on the big names. Dog Boone says, Hatman, have you heard about Ben Askren having life-threatening health complications and his insurance denying him help? I haven't heard about that. Isn't that somebody Jake Paul knocked out, Ben Askren, or am I thinking of someone else? Why do I feel like Jake Paul beat Ben Askren? Okay, he did. So it was somebody that Jake Paul beat. Was that a Triller fight? Damn, he had a double lung transplant. I never heard of that before. That's crazy. Desi says, what happened to Marcus Brown, the light heavyweight? He was quite good. I don't remember what happened to him after the Baturbiev fight, or was it the Badu Jack fight? One of those fights. He just disappeared after that. Oh, wow. Jake Paul's apparently paying for Askren's surgery. That's a nice gesture. Kylie says, top level wrestler was Askren. Didn't Marcus Brown lose to Jean Pascal, or am I imagining that? I can't remember, actually. It vaguely rings a bell that they fought. Or are you getting it confused with Chad Dawson? Chad Dawson lost to Pascal. Chad Dawson was a weird character. What do I think of Paul? Amali says he finds him unbearable. I don't particularly find him unbearable. I don't pay that much attention to him, to be fair. Just when he occasionally calls out fighters who he has no intention of actually fighting, you know, like Anthony Joshua. It's all very farcical. He's a YouTuber, you know? And he's been doing YouTube for a very long time, so he knows how to garner an audience. You know, he knows what creating a Twitter storm is all about. He was an expert at that long before he ever laced up a pair of gloves. So obviously he's bringing those skills into his boxing career, as far as, like I say, creating controversy and clout chasing and all that type of stuff. Stranginess says, Hatman, you think Wilder is trying to reinvent himself? I watched your vid, but I think he's clearly using the left hand more and compensating for his lack of speed could actually wind up being good. It's all relative at the end of the day. No matter what Deontay Wilder does, whether he sticks with his old style or tries to adjust his style to something new, I still don't see him being a factor at world level anymore. But perhaps becoming a bit more conventional might be the lesser of two evils. You know, he won't be as open to shots maybe because he's paying more attention to the fundamentals. Mark says, am I the only one that thinks Parker versus Allen is absolutely insane? How can Eddie peddle this nonsense? Yeah, it's a terrible fight. That's an easy win for Joe Parker. A stay busy for Joe Parker, basically. Easy fight for him. AJ says, were you a fan of the Super 6 tournament, the one Ward won? Yeah, I watched it. It was a bit long, though. It was an overly long tournament. But, yeah, I watched it when Froch fought Durrell. It was a very controversial fight. Many thought Durrell should have got the decision. And, of course, Lucian Bute sat the whole thing out. Shout out to Ocean Blue. Just joined the live chat there. Striker says Wilder was using a jab and threw a lot of punches because of who he was in with. Against anyone better, he will be the old Wilder. He could very well be right. He didn't have much in front of him, so he felt comfortable. But that's what those types of fights are about. Regaining your confidence. If you have enough of those types of fights, maybe you go back in against somebody serious and you do have, at least until you get hit, the confidence to hold your ground and throw more punches. But 39 years of age, I don't think Wilder really has the time to be having a load of those kind of fights. Strangeness says, I think White or Miller versus Wilder would be a good indicator. I think White would be a good fight for Wilder. I don't think Miller would be a good fight for him. I think Miller gobbles Wilder up. Literally. The answer to your question, Johnny Undon, is the Bahamas. Ocean Blue says, getting a shot at an interim title off the back of beating Johnny Fisher is madness. That's a whole fact. What a touch that would be for Dave Allen. Imagine, you beat Johnny Fisher, who's like an area level gimmick fighter, and off that, you get a shot at the interim title. That is literally madness. That is actual lunacy. Kylie says, will White retire after losing to a Tamer? I suspect not. I think you're probably right. Even though it's a very nice payday for Dylan White. If he's getting what Chisora was offered, which I think was, what was it, 2 or 3 million? It's a nice payday for him at this stage of his career. Dylan White is a natural fighter, you know? He's got a natural fighter's mentality. So, yeah, he may well continue on, even if he gets flattened in a round. He's that kind of stubborn personality. Dog Boone says, Hatman, what was your breakout business moment when you never looked back and worked for yourself? Well, that moment happened for me before I started working for myself. It happened for me when I quit my last job as an employee, and I promised myself that I would never work for anyone again for the rest of my life. I made that commitment to myself, and I knew it in my heart and my soul and my spirit. I just knew. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I just leapt off the cliff. I leapt off the cliff and I just told myself, no matter what, I am not going to work for anyone else again. Come what may, whatever will be, I am not going to work for anyone else again, ever. And so it was. So I made that commitment to myself before I started making money with my own business. It was like a psychological, or if you want to take it deeper, it was like a spiritual commitment that I've made to myself. Okay, we got somebody spamming the chat again. Weird. Taylor says, White will turn into Danny Williams in his 50s. There's a danger of that. There's definitely a danger of that. Dylan White is very, very stubborn. Very stubborn. And of course, that stubborn trait is what allowed him to have the success he's had in boxing. But it's a double-edged sword, because that very same trait could cause him to carry on far too long. Dylan White, according to reported career earnings, is already a millionaire. But then again, you know, when the tax man gets hold of you, how much is he taking off you? But with this payday here that he's getting against the Talma, it will definitely, if he wasn't before, definitely be a millionaire, a multi-millionaire. So you would hope if he gets flattened in a round or two, he would retire. But again, he's a naturally very, very stubborn individual. So a striker says, I relate to that. I remember feeling genuine depression when I was younger, working for a boss. Couldn't hold a 9-to-5 job, and it wasn't because of laziness. Yeah, same for me. Same for me. I can honestly tell you that when I was an employee, I found it soul destroying. It was literally destroying my soul. It was soul destroying. I couldn't do it. I was a terrible employee. Terrible. I was absolutely terrible. I just wasn't meant to be one. You know, I wasn't meant to be working for other people as an employee. I wasn't wired that way. Not that there's anything wrong with being wired that way. In fact, my life would have been a lot easier if I was wired that way. But for whatever reason, I'm just not wired that way where I can work for other people, so. Shout out to Copend. He says, were you a fan of the Prodigy music back in the days? Or was that too electronic for you? No, I liked some of the Prodigy's tracks. Yeah, I liked Firestarter and all that type of stuff. Even the one that George Groves uses, Spitfire, I like that track. Then there was the controversial one called Smack My Itch Up. I always liked the Prodigy. I liked their style. They had a unique sound. They were using like break beats as well as synths and stuff like that. So, yeah, I always liked the Prodigy. Kondo says, nice. How about the Linkin Park Jay-Z collab album? Never heard it. Never heard it. You know, I grew up in the 1980s when you had a lot of synth wave. They call it synth wave today. I don't think they called it synth wave back then, but I like a lot of synth wave music from the 80s. Shout out to Adam for the super chat. He says, who do you find funnier, Eubank Sr. or Palpatine? Definitely Palpatine. Palpatine all day. Eubank Sr. is hilarious, but Palpatine's next level. Shout out to Adam for the super chat. Yeah, that's another one. No good for me. That's right. What was the Prodigy's first album called? The one with the ant on the front. Was it called The Fat of the Land? I'm sure one of their albums was called The Fat of the Land. Stranginess says, synthwave reminds me of arcade video games. Yeah, like Outrun. But I liked a lot of the, you know, kind of pop music that was around in the 80s that you'd hear in the movies and whatnot. Synth heavy. Even a lot of the like pop rock stuff from the 80s I like, you know? Because that was like the soundtrack to my childhood growing up in the 1980s. It was a mixture of my parents' music, which was like reggae and soul, and then the stuff I was hearing in music videos, in movies, on the radio, and so on. In the movies, it was all like big, you know, pop rock type tracks and whatever. Synth music, synth wave stuff. You know, like the kind of rock music they had in the Rocky movies? There's no easy way out. There's no shortcut home. All that kind of stuff. Yeah. That brings back feelings of nostalgia. Yep, Survivor. Rocky, I Had a Tiger, all that. Even Karate Kid. You're the best around. Nothing in this world can get you down. You're the best. And all that. Feel good, hero's journey type music. You had like Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle. You know, Welcome to the Jungle. That must have been in a load of movies in the 80s. Welcome to the Jungle. Even, what are they called now? I always forget their name. The UK duo who did Everybody Wants to Rule the World. What is their name? I forget their name. Tears for Fears. Yeah, I like some of Tears for Fears tracks. Like Everybody Wants to Rule the World. There was another one, Head Over Heels. '80s music is underrated. Kylie says, then you had synth being incorporated into LA rap scene in the 90s. Yeah, that really came from the funk. The LA rap music was inspired by funk music, G-funk. Well, yeah, they called LA rap like G-funk and whatever, but it was inspired by all the funk music that was coming out in the 70s, 80s, that period. Okay, somebody just informed me that Fat of the Land was the third Prodigy album. All right. Shout out to Taylor. Big up, big up. BG says UK synth was the best. I can agree with that. Okay, so the first Prodigy album was called Experience. I see. I always remember the Fat of the Land with the ant on the front cover of the album. What was that their logo in general, the Prodigy, that ant? A Copen says the UK rave scene in the late 80s, early 90s was fire. I would love to have experienced it. Yeah, they had genres back then, like dance music genres, which I think have died off. I could be wrong, because some of these things, carry on, but don't really get reported about. If you know, you know. But there was certain like dance music genres back then, which you certainly don't hear about anymore. So one of them, which I think was, I'm pretty certain was a UK dance music genre, was called Happy Hardcore. Anybody ever heard of Happy Hardcore? Yeah, Happy Hardcore. Yeah, there was Acid House, that's right. All of this, many of these genres really inspired by, the pill popping, what have you. Someone says, Funky House just seemed to come and go within 5 years. Yeah, it was short-lived, wasn't it, Funky House? And that was a really nice genre, you know? Good vibes and all that. I'm not sure why Funky House didn't last. A shout out to Brad with a super chat. He says, if Usyk gets past Dubois, what would your advice be to him? And if he takes your advice, where would you rate him all time? So my advice to him would be to retire. Because if he retires now, he's going to have a better shot in the future at being ranked as a top 5 of all-time heavyweight. And the reason I say that is because, okay, he doesn't have the deepest resume at heavyweight right now. He's just beat a bunch of Brits twice. But when you factor in that the cruiserweight division did not exist during the 1970s, Alexander Usyk at cruiserweight was actually fighting people who were comparable in size to the Muhammad Ali's, Joe Frazier's, and even George Foreman's of the world. That's a fact. So if you factor that in, then you would have to include Usyk's cruiserweight run as part of his heavyweight legacy, if that makes sense, if you're looking at things in a historical context. And when you do that, you can make a legit case that this guy's a top 5 heavyweight of all time. If he were to lose to Dubois, or even beat Dubois and lose to somebody else, it doesn't take away from what he's done in my eyes. But he would lose some of his mystique. I think it's going to be better for him as far as legacy if he is only the second heavyweight champion in history to retire undefeated. If Usyk retires undefeated after beating Dubois again, not that I've got anything against Rocky Marciano, but nobody's going to talk about Rocky Marciano anymore because Alexander Usyk is like 1 billion times better than Marciano ever was. So he would basically supplant Marciano in the history books because Marciano is famous partly for that reason. He's the only heavyweight champion to retire without a loss. Well, Usyk would blow him out the water. Shout out to Desi for the super chat. And big up Brad, of course, for the super chat. Just gone there. Big up Brad. Desi says, Jalalov versus Hergovich. Also top 5 worst rappers of the 90s. That's a question. Jalalov, Hergovich. Right now, I'll go Hergovich, because Jalalov doesn't seem that confident as a pro at the moment. But I don't know. We'll see over the next couple of years if Jalalov gets his act together. I might pick him somewhere down the line. But right now, I'll pick Hergovich. Worst rappers of the 90s. I want to say... what's the name of the guy I'm thinking of? I can't remember his name now. What is that guy's name from the Bay Area? He was a terrible rapper. And there were loads of terrible rappers in No Limit, most of whose names I've forgotten. I'm not talking about Mystical. Mystical was one of the better ones. But No Limit had some flipping diabolical rappers. Just unbelievably bad. Too Short is the guy I'm thinking about. I swear he's from the Bay Area. Too Short's rubbish. He was terrible. Too Short and probably the vast majority of the No Limit roster would make up the rest of the worst rappers of the 90s. Somebody mentioned in Silk the Shocker. Yeah, he was one of them. He was terrible. Somebody already mentioned Too Short there. See? You see? See, people know. Too Short and them No Limit man were awful. They were so bad. So bad. C Murder, Silk the Shocker. Yeah, them man. Rich says, saw an interesting interview of Henry Cooper. He was literally 12 stone and still dropped Ali. Well, he was about maybe 13 stone at the time when he fought Ali, I think. But Ali was only about 14 stone himself, so, Ali was pretty small. I mean, he won a gold medal at light heavyweight. So when he turned over pro, he was not even 200 pounds, I don't think. Star Fox says, sounds like they were so bad they were good. No, they were just bad without any good about them. The No Limit rappers. Horrible. Rich says he talked about adding weights to his shoes to get to 13 stone. Oh, okay. Not sure why he would do that, other than in amateur boxing, because some amateur fighters did that. David Tua used to do that in the amateurs. To get up to weight, he would put like weights in his boots and whatever. I think David Hay also used to do that. He put weights in his pockets because he wanted to be a heavyweight so bad he had to beg it in the amateurs. And when he was boxing as a light heavyweight, he claims he put weights in his pockets or whatever at weigh-ins to get himself up to the 200-pound heavyweight limit. AJ says C Murder's name cooked him in court when he was on trial for it. Yeah, be careful what you name yourself. Desi says, Hatman, what West Coast rappers do you rate? Game is a good West Coast rapper. All right, Game. Raskaz was a good West Coast rapper. Exhibit is not bad. Better than most. Snoop Dogg is good for the comedy value. Snoop Dogg's always been a comedy rapper to me. He's got a unique style, unique voice. From a technical perspective, he wasn't a great rapper, but again, comedy value. And although Dr. Dre had ghostwriters, people like Jay-Z were writing for Dr. Dre, and before him, I think Ice Cube was writing for him when he was in NWA and whatnot. So even though Dr. Dre is not really a rapper because he doesn't write his rhymes, he executed them well. You compare Dr. Dre to like P. Diddy. P. Diddy was horrible on the mic. He had ghostwriters too. People were writing his rhymes too, but his execution was awful. You know what I mean? P. Diddy rapping was like horrendous. No matter how good the ghostwriters were, he always came across rubbish. Whereas Dr. Dre pulled it off well. Yeah, good presence on the mic, Dr. Dre. He used the ghostwriters' rhymes to good effect. Kylie says Dr. Dre was a good DJ in the 80s. What, with the world-class Wrecking Crew? The Vinyl Collector says the West Coast didn't have the most technical rappers. That's true. They did not. Which rappers do I think have good beat selection? Back in the days, Jay-Z always had good beat selection. Yeah. Jay-Z had good beat selection. I guess this is kind of playing off the question or the accusation from Vlad TV that Nas always had bad beat selection, which is probably true. But Jay-Z always had good beat selection. He would always get hot beats, And he pretty much discovered Kanye, or at least he was the first one that gave Kanye a big opportunity, because Kanye produced most of Jay-Z's Blueprint album. And the beats on that were fire. I think Just Blaze also produced a couple beats on there. But yeah, Jay-Z, a very good beat picker. The Vinyl Collector says, someone here says, do I listen to drill rap? Not really. 1 or 2 tunes over the years. That's about it. In fact, my favorite drill rap tune of all time, and like I say, I don't know that many drill rap tunes and don't particularly like most of them, but one of them that I do like, you might laugh, Chief Keef. There's a Chief Keef track called I Don't Like. For some reason, I find that mad catchy. That's that ish I don't like. Don't like. Yeah. Yeah. I like Chief Keef, I don't like. Because there's a lot of stuff I don't like, so. Them words. I sneak this, that's that ish I don't like. That's right. A fuck. I swore there, hopefully. A off ninja. Don't pick it up, algorithm, please. A sneak this, that's that ish I don't like. A off ninja, that's the ish I don't like. That's right. Chief Keef. There you go. That's the irony, Star Fox. Ironic, the track is named Don't Like, but you like it. That's the ish I don't like. That song always pops into my head, you know, at random moments when there's literally something I'm looking at that I don't like. Chief Keef will pop into my head talking about, that's that ish I don't like. Telstar says Big Pimpin' beat ahead of its time. Yeah, that was a great beat. That was Timbaland, right? Big Pimpin'. Jay-Z rapping over a Timbaland beat. BG London says, my first album on cassette tape was Ice-T Power. I want to say my first album on cassette tape must have been a Michael Jackson or Bob Marley. Probably Michael Jackson or Bob Marley in the 80s on cassette tape. Kylie says, what about Southern rappers? Ludacris, Jermaine Dupri, 3 6 Mafia, T.I. I like Ludacris. Ludacris was always a very good hit maker. He knew how to make catchy songs, catchy choruses. He had like a big, strong voice. And I watched him live once at the Forum in Kentish Town, and he put on a good performance. Because a lot of rappers are very disappointing live, but Ludacris was good. His voice carried well, and a lot of his songs are just made for live performances, you know? Move, ish, get out the way. And everybody sings that in traffic. Move, ish, get out the way. Get out the way, ish, get out the way. I got my twin Glock 40. Cock back. Roll out. Roll out. And also another Ludacris one I like, and the video's funny as well, is get back, you don't know me like that. Get back, you don't know me like that. In the video, he's at the urinal in a public toilet, and some guy, he's in a public toilet in a nightclub, right? Toilet in a nightclub. He's at the urinal relieving himself, and some guy next to him says, oh, you're Ludacris, and starts trying to strike up a conversation in a mad, annoying way. He's got those massive hands here like Hellboy. and start strangling the guy. Get back, get back. You don't know me like that. That's right. You don't know me like that. And it's kind of funny that Ludacris became more famous as an actor in the Fast and Furious franchise than he probably ever was as a rapper. And he was a famous rapper. But I want to say his Fast and Furious appearances might have surpassed the rap career. BG says Ludacris was dope. Yeah, he was dope. He had a dope style. You know, he had a formula for creating his records. He was definitely a cool rapper. You'd put Ludacris in the same kind of category as like a Busta Rhymes. They were rappers who used their voices very well. Kayvon Green says, no way his acting career surpassed his rapping. I beg to differ. If you look at the money he made from his acting career and the amount of people who saw him in the Fast and Furious movies, I'm telling you it surpassed his rap career. It's like Ice Cube's acting career has way surpassed his rap career. I mean, that's not even close. Ice Cube's acting career has made him probably, 100 times more money and given him 100 times more exposure than his rap career ever did. And he had a good rap career, Ice Cube, but his acting just on another level. Now, Ludacris has not been as successful in acting as Ice Cube, but I still want to say his acting has surpassed his music. If you think about how big the Fast and Furious franchise is, it's huge. Globally, you know? You got to think outside of the West. Maybe you're thinking from an American perspective, but the Fast and Furious movies are massive globally in countries where people don't really listen to rap like that, but they watch Fast and Furious. Do you know what I mean? Mr. Richards says, yes, Hatman, I watched Ade and G-Man's rewatch of AJ Usyk 2. I was surprised at how well AJ performed. His body shots were impressive and he was letting his hands go. Was that AJ's best performance? I want to say it was AJ's last decent performance. I don't think it was his best performance, but it was his last decent performance. When you factor in the level of opposition. Okay, he demolished Otto Wallin, but that's a guy he'd sparred a lot in the past, and Wallin was no great shakes. And he knocked out Ngannou, who was supposed to knock out Ngannou. So when you factor in level of opposition, Usyk 2 was AJ's last decent performance. That's a high level, you know? Kayvon Green says America is the only place that matters. Sarcasm. The Vinyl Collector says most of the rappers turn actors are the same. Will Smith, Mark Wahlberg, Common, Ice-T, maybe even LL Cool J have made far more from acting than rapping. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You get way more money as an actor if you make it in Hollywood than you'll make rapping, for sure. Because those record labels are thieves, bro. You know what I mean? Being signed to them labels, they're going to rob you blind. Whereas when you're an actor, you get paid a set fee, which is negotiated before the project even starts. This is what you're paying me for this movie. Do you know what I mean? Whereas with music, you're getting like a percentage of album sales, and it's usually low. Album and single sales, you might get, 5% or something. That's how it used to be. And the record labels have got all kind of funny ways to relieve you of your money. Even the little that you do make. One of the classic things that record labels, particularly in rap music, used to do. Yeah, that's right, Kayvon. Touring is where the money is. That's right. But that's hard work. You know, touring is not easy. It's a lot easier being an actor and shooting a movie for a couple of months than going on tour all around the world and, on a tour bus and all that type of business. Being an actor is a lot easier than that. But one of the things they used to do to catch people out, maybe they still do it, I'm not sure. I think the music industry has changed a lot, but they would pay rappers advances. And these rappers would get excited and spend up all their advance, not realizing that that advance is basically a loan from the record company to produce the album. So all of that money from their advance will be deducted later down the line. And if you didn't make enough money, you could end up in debt to the record label. You know, if the album didn't sell well enough. So you'd end up basically as a slave to the record label until you paid your debt off. Kylie says, Luda was mad raw back in the days. He toned down his image when he got that Fast and Furious check. That's a fact. Star Fox. Okay, he's talking about that. What's that rapper called now who did Igor? I always forget his name, but I know the freestyle you're talking about. That was wild. Where he says, me and Flex looking through the index. Yeah, that was crazy. And Flex was like, what made you go with that verse? What made you go with that verse? Tyler, the Creator, thank you. That's the one, Tyler, the Creator. What made you go with that verse? Tyler, the Creator, channeling his inner Fleece Johnson with them bars there. The Vital Collector says, I don't give a F. That was hilarious. It's how he stared at him after finishing the bar. Yeah, that was awkward as hell. Sizzler or Buju? I gotta go Sizzler over Buju. Yeah, Sizzler Kalanji. Final Collector says Sizzler Kalanji all day. Yeah, I'm with you. Sizzler. Dry Cry. Yes, you got to be strong. Mavado or Vibes, come on, man. Vibes all day over Mavado. All day long. 365, what? No, Vibes duppies Mavado. Mavado had like 1 or 2 tunes, bro. Then he was done. Vibes, I mean, his catalog is deep. Marlo says Sizzler needs to come to the UK. Is he not still banned from the UK? He was defiant, right? Rastaman, no, apologize to Nope, T-boy. It is King Selassie, I'm a gunshot, ya boy. Amali says, thoughts on Andrew Tate? He's very funny. That's pretty much my thoughts on him. He's funny. Andrew Tate videos are funny. It's just that simple. Very, very funny. Do I take him seriously as some kind of like leader for the youth? No. But his videos are funny. I mean, when he goes on these rants and he starts talking about brokies and Yeah, he's funny. Abdul get the rocks and all. It's hilarious. Kayvon Green says, prime for prime, you versus Tate, who wins? In a boxing match? Come on now. I destroy Andrew Tate in a boxing match. Probably beat him now. Never mind back then. But, maybe in kickboxing or something, because I never done kickboxing. Dr. Wu Doc says, never understood your stance on Jordan Peterson. Really? Why is that? Jordan Peterson's a donut. He's an absolute donut and a fraud. It should be obvious why he is. I mean, in 2020, right there it was. You know, anyone who was about anything when it comes to like challenging the establishment, they would have shown it in 2020. If not, they're phony. Like, you can't build your whole career on being like somebody that challenges the powers that be or speaks truth to power, and then you're silent when the establishment shows its teeth. Same with Akala. That's why I don't like Akala. Or what's the other one called? Akala and Low Key. Them men are all frauds. You can't be a fair weather rebel. You know what I mean? Like, them man like Akala and Low Key, them men are rebels when the mainstream media gives you a little platform to be a fake rebel for the lefties and that. I don't rate it. Kayvon Green says, Jordan Peterson's wife almost died. I give him a pass. I don't give him a pass. Because I'm skeptical about all these claims, you know. This one nearly died and that one nearly, Boris Johnson nearly died. Yeah, I'm very skeptical about a lot of that. Someone says, Akala smashing Angelina Jolie. That's the kind of weird thing that he would probably do. So if that's true, I'm not surprised. How old is Angelina Jolie now? Like 50? So that's a kind of weird thing a guy like him would do. AJ says, Akala is just straight annoying. Yeah, Akala's like, Akala, how can I even describe Akala? Akala is, he's like a mainstream, safe anti-establishment guy. Do you know what I mean? He's like the fake anti-establishment guy that the mainstream put on television to give you the illusion that there's actually real discourse going on mainstream television. AJ says industry plant. And the thing is about industry plants, they don't necessarily know that they're industry plants. Do you know what I mean? Some of them do, but others I don't think they necessarily know. Maybe deep down they know, but I don't think they are, or all of them at least, consciously trying to deceive anyone or play a particular. I don't think they necessarily sat down and told, okay, we're going to use you as an industry plant. I don't think it's always like that. Kayvon Green says, these young dudes dating older women is so strange. Like in 20s, I had zero interest in older women. Hell, I'm 40. And other than my wife, I got zero interest in women over 35. I'm the same. And if it's the wife and you're, getting older together, then, well, you love the wife, right? So you don't see her through the same eyes that you would if she was a stranger. Does that make sense? Because you love the wifey, so, love enhances somebody in your eyes. And of course, you remember her when she was younger and you got all this history together and all that type of business. But if you're like a 40-year-old man going out into the dating market and you're single, you're not looking at 40-year-old women. Like, ideally, you don't want a 40-year-old woman. You can get a younger one who's prettier because, with the youth and everything, you prefer that. But yeah, these young guys who are going for old women, it is weird. Richard Riakporhe being a prime example. What on earth is that all about? That's some weird granny fetish or something. Because women by nature, females by nature are hypergamous. And an aspect of hypergamy is women tend to be attracted to men who can teach them things. Yeah? That's why even from a young age, girls tend to be attracted to older guys. They're attracted to somebody who can teach them stuff. It's not just the resources. The resources are an aspect of it. But it's also someone you can learn from. A lot of girls like that. A guy your age is not going to be able to teach you as much. You're not going to be able to learn as much. You see what I'm saying? So the age gap thing is an aspect of hypergamy. But for men don't tend to be hypergamous. We're not looking for a woman to provide for us, unless you're like some kind of waste man or you're trying to get, I don't know, somewhere to live or something. You're fully broke. But generally, men are not hypergamous. We don't look at a woman and think, oh, she's going to provide for me. I want her to have a great job. We don't care, right? And therefore, we're not looking for somebody who is older, because generally older equals more resources and stuff like. We're not looking for that. We don't care about a woman, oh, she's got this degree, and we don't care. If you're a man and you're making your own money, what do you care about a woman's job? We don't give a damn. And that's why it's so weird when women lead with their education. Oh, I've got this degree and that degree. And as a man, you're just like, oh, that's cool. What's that supposed to mean to me? You ain't spending the money you're making off that degree on me. So why would I care? Why are you even telling me this stuff? I don't care. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, I have augmented reality when it comes to my wife. I swear she still looks 20 unless I really stare at her. No lie, my mind really sees her that way. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was alluding to. When you've been with someone for that long, from when they were in their 20s or whatever, you still see them the same way that they were in their 20s, you know? You put it perfectly. It's like your mind is augmented reality, 100%. That's the way it works. When you have them kind of like feelings for somebody, it enhances the way they look, or maybe preserves the way they look in a way where they still look the same to you as when you first met them. It's only when you look at photos of back in the days, that's when you realize how much you've both changed. That's when you realize how much you've both aged, you know? Kayvon Green said, no, a waste man basically just means like a loser. That's a London slang term for a loser, is a waste man. Somebody says, grab a granny. Yeah, Riakporhe is weird as hell for that Madonna thing, man. I don't know what that's all about. Very, very strange. Leave the grannies alone. You know, some guys are weird like that. So, there are certain weird individuals that have a granny fetish. I remember back in the days in London, there was some proper weirdo who was going around and breaking into old ladies' houses and graping them. Any of you guys remember that? This guy must have been in his 20s or 30s at the time, and he was breaking into old ladies' houses who were like in their 60s and 70s and graping them. What a weirdo. There are weirdos out there like that. They got some kind of granny fetish. Island Grill, see, he remembers him. Yeah. Back in the day, some weird serial rapist in London, like, moving on to grannies. Off-key stuff. AJ says, yo, I remember, rings a bell, he done a few, I think. Yeah, he did quite a few. He was at large for a while. I swear they even put it on Crime Watch. Because this guy was so prolific. Weird dude. Yeah, grannies were on high alert for that guy. What a strange individual. BG says, never attracted to Madonna, even in her prime. React Poor is a savage. Yeah, I was never attracted to Madonna either. Damn, Island Grill says, I think he was Jamaican. That's a hard alpha yard. That one there. Danny says, React Poor and Madonna is disgusting. I can't imagine there are many people who disagree with that. And those who do disagree with it need to be looked at with a very suspicious eye. Dominica says, British, you weren't no Jamaican. All right, somebody disputing it. I don't recall, to be fair. It's literally the most bizarre crime in it, because a granny is never going to imagine that that could happen to her. A granny might think somebody would snatch her purse. That's probably the worst, or maybe even rob her in her house if they think she's got money in there. But in terms of like graping, like a granny would never imagine that that could happen. Like they wouldn't imagine anybody sees them like that anymore. So what a weirdo. AJ says that was when there was no social media a long time ago. It was major news. When I remember it now, it was crazy. Yeah, it was big news. I swear it was on Crime Watch. Back when Crime Watch was big. I think it might have been post Jill Dando though, rather than pre Jill Dando. I forget. And last I checked, the Jill Dando case was never solved, was it? Because they wrongly convicted that guy, Barry George. But his conviction was eventually overturned or quashed or whatever. And to my knowledge, they never actually convicted anyone for that. And of course, there's lots of speculation that it was actually a UK establishment hit. There was some claims that Dando was early on the Savile stuff, and she got knocked off for that. Who knows? All right, Alan Grill says the dude's name is Delroy Grant and he is Jamaican. I mean, that's about the most Jamaican name that you could possibly hear. Delroy Grant, you know what I mean? Delroy. That was such a popular name among Caribbeans back in the days, particularly Jamaicans. Delroy. The only more Jamaican name than that would be Delroy Brown. There are so many Browns out of yard. You know, Delroy Brown. The proper Jamaican name. More popular than Errol. Of a certain generation, I would say it was, yeah. Of a certain generation, Delroy was more popular than Errol, I think. Yes. Errol was very popular, but Delroy was crazy back in the days. Winford, that's another one. Winston. Oh my gosh. Winston. Yup, Lloyd. All kind of old school names. Lloyd, Clifton. Lincoln. Derek. Denzel. There you go. They're old school Caribbean names. Liebert. Trevor. Of course, Trevor. Yeah. Trevor. Winston, man. Yup. Winston was popular, bro. I have to imagine that was inspired by Winston Churchill. Winston. Marvin was a pretty popular name. Marvin. The Vinyl Collector says my uncle's name was Winston and my other uncle called Trevor. See, that's just Caribbean family right there. No mistake in it. If your uncles are called Winston and Trevor. BG London says Wayne. Win. Whenever I hear Wayne, I always think about Shutters. Win. You know the corrupt politician in Shutters? I think he's called Mr. Anderson, isn't he? The politician in Shutters. Win. Will you put me in a spot? Shout out to Jamal. Streatham Hill. Big up the Streatham Massive. Final Collector says, I could go on forever with the amount of uncles and cousins I got. My granddad and his brother moved over during Windrush and went mental. Shout out to Hard Work for the super chat. He says, is it possible for Bud to replicate what Leonard did to Hagler? Anything is possible, but obviously Leonard had a different style to Crawford. Leonard had much faster hands than Bud Crawford. And he used raiding tactics, loads of movement, ridiculously fast combination punching in spots, sticker move, frustrate Hagler, get out the way. And he did it for the entire distance of the fight. Crawford doesn't have the level of speed advantage, I don't think. He is faster than Canelo, definitely. But I don't think he I don't think the speed gap is as big with Canelo Crawford, at least in terms of hand speed. Foot speed gap is pretty big. But the hand speed gap I don't think is as big between Canelo and Crawford as it was between Ray Leonard and Hagler. And he's not going to get rewarded, I don't think, Terence Crawford, for using running tactics, particularly after what Turki Al-Sheikh has just said. So, I don't know. I'm picking Canelo because I think Crawford's really going to have to beat Canelo up to get a decision. And he's not going to stop him unless there's a cut or something. He's really going to have to beat Canelo up. And beating him up means staying in the pocket long enough for Canelo to actually get his own shots off. And can Crawford stand up to them kind of shots? Maybe he can. We'll see. Because he's going to get hit. If he's trying to beat Canelo up, he's going to get hit in there. And how will he react to that kind of power? Dog Boone says Winston came from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. No, it definitely didn't originate there. Winston is a name that was very popular in the Caribbean, but particularly countries like Jamaica, going way back to at least the mid-20th century. Kayvon Green says, Heart says Bud, Logic says Canelo. The Vinyl Collector says, I can't lie, I'm picking Crawford. I just have a feeling. The odds ain't the greatest, though. Oh, okay. My bad. Dog Boone says, no, Hatman, my nickname. Oh, okay. The nickname is from... All right. So your nickname is Winston, and it's from the Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I see. Is Shutters the best Yard movie? That's a question right there. Is Shutters the best Yard movie? You want to go way back in the days, there was the Jimmy Cliff movie, The Harder They Come, which was kind of a similar type of film. When did that come out? The 70s? Alan Grill says he likes rockers. What was the one with... What's the one I'm thinking of now? Third World Cop is Sick. Yeah, I know that one. Oh, Babylon. No, but Babylon's based in the UK. Nah, Babylon's not a Yard film. I'm talking about the films that are actually based in Yard. All right, Mr. Richards is saying, Rockers, Better Must Come, Countryman. See, some of these films have got the nostalgia, but if you were to watch them back to back now, you still preferring them over Shutters? Like Shutters, I'm not saying Shutters was like one of the greatest movies from any country of all time, but it's watchable even now. Vinyl Collector says, fair in that case, I'm struggling to make a case for anything over Shutters. Shutters starring Kamani Marley. It was Kamani, right? What was my favorite rhythm of all time? I like the Bada Bada rhythm. So Bada Bada rhythm is definitely one of them. That was produced by Who produced by, I want to say Ward 21 produced it, Bada Rhythm. I also liked, what other rhythms did I like? Karate Rhythm. What's the name of the rhythm that Bounty Killer did Can't Believe My Eyes on? Brockout Rhythm. Yes, Brockout Rhythm. Brockout Rhythm. That's Can't Believe My Eyes, isn't it? Brockout Rhythm. I swear it is. Drop Leaf. Yep, that's a classic. Yes, you got to be strong. Karate Rhythm is definitely fire. Who produced Karate Rhythm? They don't make rhythms like that no more. Karate Rhythm went crazy, bro. That rhythm was a madness. It seems like nobody's backing me on Brockout Rhythm. Maybe people don't remember it. Buzz Rhythm. Yeah, Buzz Rhythm was cool. That's the one where Sean Paul did the Give Me the Light and Pass the Draw and all that, innit? That was Buzz Rhythm. Yeah, Can't Believe My Eyes was Brockout. That's definitely one of my favorite rhythms right there. Brockout Rhythm. Brockout. Yeah. I also like Scarface Rhythm. Anyone remember Scarface Rhythm? And one of the best versions, one of the best karate rhythm versions was Shabba Ranks. I can't remember what his one was called, what his dub was. What was it called now? It might have been called Get Him the Shabba. Maybe it was called Get Him the Shabba. Shabba is there. Anything they bring Shabba Ranks ready for. They say, Ranks is the man, number one. All right. You see me moving every year. See me fly regular. We me old Jennifer. Anything me ready for. Shabba Ranks a warrior. Me not play sorry for. No? No one recognize it? Shabba is there. Them old school bashment rhythms will never be surpassed. From like the 90s era, early 2000s. Nah, bro. Dancehall today is like trap dancehall, innit? All the rhythms are all 808s and it barely even sounds like dancehall again. The 90s, early 2000s dancehall, that was the golden age. Yeah, they don't make rhythms like that again. Alan Gross says, are you thinking of martial arts rhythm? Yeah, for that Shabba one, that was martial arts rhythm, yeah. Yeah, dancehall is dead now. Now it don't even sound like dancehall again. It sounds like some generic trap type music where it's all auto-tune everywhere. And I love Vibes Cartel music, but Vibes Cartel kind of helped to usher in this new style of dancehall because he started using rhythms which were not conventional dancehall rhythms. And he started bringing in all the auto-tune and stuff like that, you know, before he got locked up. BG says, Afrobeats is fire. Yeah, I really like Amapiano, which is like, if you want to call it a version, a subgenre of Afrobeats. Some people would say it's completely separate to Afrobeats, but whatever. if we use Afrobeats as an umbrella term for all African-based modern dance music, Amapiano. I really like Amapiano. I love the way that in Amapiano they used log drum in really creative ways. Who's my favorite old school reggae artist? Not to be obvious with the first one, but Bob Marley's got to be there. I grew up on Bob Marley. Garnet Silk. I did like Super Cat. Beres Hammond. Of course. Who else? Barrington Levy. Who was always a Barrington Levy guy. Dennis Brown. Of course, Dennis Brown. Yup, he'd definitely be another one. Jimmy Cliff, Alton Ellis. But yeah, Dennis Brown. Bob Marley. That man there. Beres Hammond. Why do I feel like Beres Hammond is underrated? Beres Hammond had so many hits, it's ridiculous. That's where he's still performing now. Why is Beres Hammond not as big a star? Do you know what I mean? Like, why is he not? I don't get it. Because Beres Hammond music is fire. Alec Grill says, because he ain't got dreads. He don't fit the packaged Jamaican image that you need. Is that what you're saying? Now, that was one of my favorite back in the days, Badman tunes right there. Star Fox says, Elephant Man using R. Kelly's World's Greatest Rhythm has to be the best use of a non-commercial rhythm ever. Yeah, that was hilarious, bro. I had the Green Sleeves CD that had all the different versions. Actually, nah. Because there wasn't a load of different versions of that particular. Now, I must have had a Green Sleeves, like, best of whatever year that was that had a load of different rhythms on it. But I certainly had a bag of CDs where it was just one rhythm with different artists doing their versions. But yeah, Badman or Badman, that's what it was called. The Elephant Man on the R. Kelly World's Greatest. That was hilarious, bro. That was hilarious. Badman or Badman. I mean a rad man, no. Badman no freak man. Gunshot a beat man. Badman not support gay. Same way Jamaican stay. Oh, Badman no play. Pass me the AK. Anytime you buck up in a real bad man. Ridiculous. When that used to come on in the rave, that was my tune right there. That was my tune right there. What? Bad man, a bad man. Yeah. Elephant Man had a good run back in the early 2000s. A real strong run. Ellie. Yeah, that tune there. Pon the river, pon the bank. Log on and step on chichi man. Log on. If you not say you're not icky man, log on and step on chichi man. Dance me a dance and a bun out a freaky man. That's right. Ninja Man, of course. The GOAT. The real bad man. Yeah, you're too bad, man. You're too... Yeah, I remember that. And in fact, Elephant Man even did one tune that was based on Silent Night, the Christmas Carol. You guys ever hear that? You know, Silent Night, Holy, yeah. Elephant Man did a version of that where he was talking about shooting and I think it was called Bad Man Christmas. Yeah, it was called Bad Man Christmas. Actually, it started off with a Silent Night and then it turned into Joy to the World. Yeah, it was like a remix of Joy to the World. You know, Joy to the World. Yeah. Elephant Man's version was Sorrow to the World. Can't make them rise me gone. Something like that. Oh my days. Yeah, Ellie was just ridiculous, bro. He was so extra. The energy god. Energy god. And you know, Deneo teethed that name off Elephant Man. Remember that? Deneo started calling himself the energy god. That's Elephant Man's name. If I ain't seen Wilder and Miller go back and forth on social media, I haven't. We'll see if that fight happens. I doubt it. There's another one. Yep. Alan Gross says he took I Will Survive and made it into Willie Bounce. And that was something that Dancehall was famous for. I remember there was, I can't remember who did it, but there was some track, I don't know what genre you would describe it as, back in the 90s called Sail Away. It charted in the UK pretty high. I'm not sure where the artist was from. Some woman. Sail away, sail away, sail away. Yeah. And there was some dancehall artist that took the melody of that and started chatting Badman lyrics. Started chatting Badman lyrics to that melody. Oh my days. TC says, do you like cake and custard? Well, as long as that's not a euphemism for something weird, then if you're talking about like, you know, primary school cake and custard, yeah. Yeah, Badman. So that's what it was. Enya that did Sail Away, Sail Away. And there was some dancehall man that remixed that into a Badman thing. Desi says, Elephant Man has 38 kids moving like he's from Church Road. So what, is he surpassed Ninja Man? How many kids has Ninja Man got? Is he in the 30s? Mr. Richard says, honorary shout out to TOK. When you cry, I cry. I cry along with you. When you smile, I smile. I smile along with you. That was Drop Leaf Rhythm, right? Drop Leaf Rhythm, I'm pretty sure it was. Oh, Star Fox says his actual name of a rhythm, the Sail Away Rhythm. All right, so the bassist for Bob Marley had 41 kids. See, these men shoot and don't miss. An old school yard man, shoot and don't miss, bro. And Jamal says, Hatman, I've been meaning to ask, did you ever play The Getaway on PS2? If I did, I don't remember it. Sorry to disappoint, because I didn't actually own a PS2. I had a friend of mine that had a PS2, and I used to go around there and play PS2 from time to time. And I played certain games GTA and whatever. And there was Mike Tyson boxing on the PS2, which I quite liked. If I did play The Getaway, which I might have done, I don't remember it. Star Fox says it was a janky GTA clone based in London. Oh, damn. So Miller's taking it there, has he? He's mentioning Telly Swift. Yeah, Miller has got no chill when it comes to the trash talk. He goes straight for the jugular. Man thinks it's battle rap. All right, shout out to Ben for the super chat. He says, I don't think Bud can take Canelo's power. I'd be surprised if he can. I'd be surprised if Bud can take Canelo's power. I'd be surprised if he can. And that's why I think it's very difficult for him to win the fight. Because in order to land the kind of quality shots that I think will be necessary to get a decision, he's going to need to stay in the pocket long enough for Canelo to be able to get his own shots off. Desi says super chat ain't working. Oh, for real? Because there was one stream a few streams back where people were trying to type in the name Wardley, and that wasn't allowing them to send a super chat, as bizarre as that was. Maybe because it's got war in the name. Some weird stuff. Ocean Blue says could be a VPN. Yeah, it could be. If you're using a VPN, maybe it's blocking you. Ocean Blue says, I assume Miller's mentioned Wilder smashing his brother's missus. Yeah, Miller is literally like a battle rapper. He's going to say the most personal things with no F's given. So Mr. Richard says, Crawford will outclass Canelo. Canelo is low volume. Canelo's only pathway to victory is a KO. I don't see him KOing Bud as he is too slow. But will Crawford get a decision sticking and moving? He can stick and move and outpoint Canelo that way, maybe. But are the judges going to see it in his favor? Or will he get jobbed? I'm going to assume he'll get jobbed if he's going to fight that way. Danny says Bud's defense isn't that good. He gets hit. Yeah, he does get hit. Because he likes to actually go for the knockout. Bud's not a guy that's content generally to move around the ring and outpoint you. He wants to close the show. So he's willing to stay in the pocket in spots and hit you with something big. He's a closer, as Dwyer likes to call it. Anthony says, Hatman, thoughts on alien abduction? It's a fascinating subject. It's a fascinating subject. I've never had an alien abduction experience, but there are so many people who have. I have to imagine there's something going on there. I don't know exactly what the nature of it is. Is it a psychic phenomenon? Is it, actual entities from another dimension or another planet? In some cases, I have no idea. I'm kind of agnostic on these bizarre mysteries. And it's almost certainly a mixture of many things. Obviously, there are going to be lots of charlatans that claim they got abducted and nothing happened. But there are also people who tell these abduction stories. And when I listen to them, I think that they believe what they're saying. That's what I will say. I've seen people tell abduction stories, and I think they believe what they're saying. What actually happened? I don't know. Shout out to Warts for the super chat. Star Fox says you don't hear as much about probing as you used to. Yeah, them probes were very Diddy-ish. What's up with them Diddy-ish probes? In fact, that's a line out of, not Diddy-ish, but I think it was it Starship Troopers? There was some like black guy with dreadlocks. Was like, what's up with them probes, man? What's up with them? when the abduction, why are they trying to probe you like Diddy? What's all that about, bro? Somebody says alien freak off. Okay, Joseph, is it Rhodes? Says there was some Congress hearings on UAP today. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. Mr. Richard says the last time Canelo KO'd someone was against Caleb Plant 4 years ago. Yeah, he hasn't had a KO for a while, and most Canelo fights tend to go the distance, but he does score quite a few knockdowns, doesn't he? Even though he doesn't KO people, he does manage to hurt people and drop people still. Shout out to Desi for the super chat. He says, what's the website you got your astrology read? It wasn't at a website. It was a female who I encountered on social media who read my birth chart. It wasn't a website. I went after she read my birth chart. That's when I started looking at certain websites. I couldn't remember the name of them, the websites I looked at, but they were like hardcore astrology websites. One or two of them she recommended, then I looked at others, just searching myself. But yeah, it was an individual that I met on social media. It wasn't a particular website. Kylie says when they abducted Diddy, they didn't want to leave. Or Diddy didn't want. Yeah, Diddy didn't want to leave. Mr. Richard says, I don't understand how Wilder has lost his power. It's as if he no longer has fast twitch muscle fibers. Well, you get slower as you age, right? So it's kind of natural. You're not going to be as fast twitch when you're 40 as you were when you were 30. So you're going to slow down. And also, as I said in my post-fight video for the Herndon fight, Deontay Wilder used to fight off emotion. So he would channel all of his anger and frustration and viciousness and everything into that right hand when he would throw it. And that's what gave it the extra zip. Part of the speed of that right hand was the athleticism. But the extra part of it was from the pain in Deontay Wilder's soul that he could channel into that punch, you know? And that's why he would say all this dark stuff about wanting to catch a body. Like, I get it, because that's what I used to do. I used to channel all my frustration, pain, anger, every bit of like negative, intense emotion I had, I would channel it into my power shots. And that's the way I would train. That's the way I would hit things. I would hit things. I can say this now because I can't get in any kind of trouble with any boxing body. But when I was hitting things to catch a body, bro. When I was hitting the bag, I'm thinking about catching a body. So when I heard Wilder say it and Mike Tyson say and all that kind of stuff, I get it, because that's the mentality you get yourself into when you're really trying to punch hard. You're getting yourself into the most extreme mindset, and that extreme mindset manifests in an increase in your punching power. Obviously, punching power is to do with technique and, strength to a certain extent, so on and so forth. But you can take it to another level again when you start having, as Costamato used to say, bad intentions when you punch. Costamato never specified what the bad intentions were. I'm telling you, the bad intentions, well, Mike Tyson admitted, was he was trying to catch a body, bro. That's literally what he was trying to do. The intensity of those thoughts will manifest in more vicious punching. So often when I was like in the gym, even hitting the bag, other people would look at me and be like, damn, you're trying to kill the bag. And I'm like, yeah, actually. Yes, actually. So yeah, Wilder doesn't have, the point I needed to finish is that Wilder doesn't have the same intense emotion anymore. And because his emotion is not as intense, his punches are not as powerful. And they're not as fast. And that's another natural thing. As you get older, you tend to mellow. You know? And especially after his ayahuasca journey. Where he came back all kumbaya and feeling sorry for his opponents and all this type of stuff. Boxing is no place to feel sorry for your opponents, bro. Because once you start feeling sorry for your opponents, you're going to start holding back. You know, not that Wilder is holding back, but Chris Eubank Sr. would be an example of that. He was so shaken by what happened against Michael Watson that he wouldn't go in on anybody anymore. He was scared to finish people. And while that shows, again, compassion and things which in the normal course of human interaction are desirable traits, in boxing, it's not desirable to show compassion because your opponent ain't going to show you any compassion, bro. Mr. Richard says, Hatman, do you think Napa would be able to punch up Billy Joe Saunders in a street fight? I've never seen Napa fight. He's a big, strong man, but there's plenty of big, strong men who can't fight at all. So I've never seen him fight. There are certain men the size of Napa who get hit with one clean punch on the chin. I've seen it. And down they go from a much smaller guy. A lot of big guys like that have never actually been hit properly. Do you know what I mean? Because they're so big, people don't even dare challenge them. So they can go for long stretches in their life where they never even get hit. So I don't know whether an Napa can fight or not. I got no idea. What would happen if Billy Joe caught him clean on the chin? Would he be able to take it? I don't know. You know, you can't think of a civilian like Napa the way you would think of a heavyweight boxer, because heavyweight boxers are used to taking punches. Someone that's not used to taking punches, even if they're big like that, you don't know whether they can take any kind of shot. Even from a super middleweight, you don't know. Trust me, I've seen guys as big as him, bigger than him, go down from punches from much smaller guys. I've seen it. President Brush says Napa is powered by pounded yam. He'll be okay. Hard food. Yep, hard food would be yam, green banana, dumpling, Boiled dumpling, not fried dumpling. Star Fox says hard food versus the hard road. JR says Wilder's statue is horrendous. It doesn't really look like him, does it? From what I can remember of it. I don't think it looks that much like him. It's kind of generic. But there's a synchronicity with Deontay Wilder, right? Because he's from a place called Tuscaloosa in Alabama. Now that town, Tuscaloosa, was named after a famous for his time, Native American warrior chief. That was the guy's name, Tuscaloosa. And apparently in whatever Native American language that is, Tuscaloosa means the black warrior. Okay? That's what the name Tuscaloosa means in that Native American language, the black warrior. And this Tuscaloosa individual, right, this Native American warrior chief, he was said to be about 6'7" tall. How's that for synchronicity? That whatever it was, century and a half later, they get a black heavyweight champion out of Tuscaloosa who's 6'7", and he's definitely a warrior. Yeah, interesting synchronicity. Because it's not like Tuscaloosa's a big place. It's a small town, you know? Small town. Might not even be 100,000 people, the population. It's a small place. So it's not like they have loads and loads of people who can be construed as, 6'7", quote unquote, black warriors coming out of there. Ocean Blue said, man said grown men were crying, the unveiling of Wilder's statue. That was weird. I think Wilder was still kind of spaced out from the ayahuasca because he was saying some weird stuff at that time. Someone's saying they stole a Michael Jordan statue and just dropped it in Tuscaloosa. Jay says Wilder's legs in his last fight look like prosthetics. Well, he was wearing leggings. Did you notice that? And one of the interesting things, actually, about the early years of colonial America is that, the early European explorers and what have you reported encountering giant natives. Bear in mind, the average height of a Spaniard back then might have been, a Spanish man might have been 5'4". So you do have to take that into account. But in South America and in North America and Central America, they said that they encountered giant natives, giant individuals. Sometimes it would be one guy in a tribe, right? That's not too unusual. But there was a certain part of South America where they encountered like tribes of giants, people who were enormous, right? And it does make you think what was going on there. And actually they depict this, by the way, in popular culture. So for example, you know, in the video game Street Fighter, they've got a character called T-Hawk. And T-Hawk is this Native American Mexican character who's like over 7 feet tall. So in some of these like video games and pop culture things, you'll actually see them making allusions to stuff that explorers back in the days reported when they went into the Americas. They reported seeing enormous people, giants. And yeah, T-Hawk in Street Fighter was supposed to be like 7.5 foot tall. And the giants reported by some of the European explorers in the Americas were said to be around that height, like 7.5 feet tall. I think some of them even 8 feet tall. Obviously, you wonder how accurate some of these measurements are, but still, compared to the Spaniards who encountered them, they were flipping enormous. And there's even a character in Mortal Kombat who is like what is the name of the I can't remember the name of is Khan something. Is it Kukul Khan? I'm not sure whether he was like a Central American deity or whether he was an actual real person. I can't remember now. But he's also depicted as being massive in Mortal Kombat, like extremely tall. Am I familiar with the Olmec heads? Yes, I am. I'm very familiar with the Olmec heads. Yes. Danny says Kukul Khan is a dragon god. Okay, he's called Kotal Khan in Mortal Kombat. Yeah, but he's depicted as being very tall. And again, that's an allusion to, I think, the early European explorers into the Americas when they were encountering very tall people. The first round boxing says, was Saddam Hussein good or bad? It's definitely not as easy as saying he was good or bad. I mean, in fact, the best way to describe it is that the vast majority of world leaders are bad, but some are worse than others. And Saddam was certainly a, brutal guy, but Iraq was better with him in power. That's one thing I'll agree with that Trump has said. The Iraqis are better off with Saddam than without him, because it's been terrible since. It's the regime the regimes that have taken over since Saddam have been worse, more oppressive, more violent than he was. That tends to be what happens. I think at first, I'm not sure if it's still a Shia regime that runs Iraq at the moment, but basically when the Shia got in, it's almost like they were taking vengeance against the Sunnis, and they were like 10 times as vicious as Saddam was. But yeah, Saddam was a bad guy, but he at least kept the country stable for sure. He kept all the different factions from fighting each other and whatnot. He was a strong man. And of course, the West put him in power in Iraq in the first place. They put him in the first place. He was actually the West's guy, for a good while. Indeed, like JR says, you can't put Western-style regimes into those countries. Yeah, you can't, man. You have to just let them sort their, countries out in their own time. That's exactly right, Afrojam. They used him as a pawn in the Iran-Iraq war. That's correct. Yep, they used him as an attack dog against Iran. That's correct. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, question everything. 1,000,000%, my bro. Question everything. Question it all. Why? Because, as Socrates is once said to have said, the only real wisdom is knowing that I know nothing. Question everything. Big up Matt every time. First round boxing says, should Iran regime change? That's for them to sort out themselves. I don't agree with all this foreign intervention stuff. They never attacked anybody. Iran hasn't invaded another country in terms of making the first move for, I think, a couple of centuries. So I wouldn't want to live in Iran. But that's their business. How they run their country and what they do, that's for them as a society to sort it all out amongst themselves. Not the kind of country I'd want to live in, but that's their business. A shout out to Matt. He says, at the end of the day, the American way has become a scenario where we believe our way is the best way. Doesn't mean it is. Question everything, as I say. I completely agree with you. And of course, what most people in the world, in every country, it's not just America, it's every country around the world, what most people never consider is the reality that in some instances, the side that they're on, right, their country, are going to be the ones who are in the wrong. But no, if you go to the vast majority of countries in the world, the people that live in that country through propaganda and all that kind of stuff are always going to believe that their country is in the right whenever they're in conflict with any other country. Very few people will question whether their country's in the right in a conflict. They just assume that it is. But if everyone thinks that way, then obviously there's a problem in it. So since talking about Persia, I'm going to refer to it as Persia for the sake of the algorithm. Talking about Persia, Persian food is great. The Persians are right up there with the Turks when it comes to grilled meat. They know how to grill some meat, I'll tell you that, boy. Persian food is up there. When it comes to that grill, they don't mess about. Matt says, the scary thing about America as well is that we talk about having so much freedom, but if you break one law, they take it away for years so easily. The sentencing in America is nuts. Yeah, the sentencing is crazy. Danny says shawarmas are top tier. Shawarmas are not Persian, though. Shawarmas are more like an Arab thing from the Levant. I'm pretty sure shawarmas originate from the Levant. But Persians have their own versions of these things, right? And Persian grill is just very nice. Turkish, Persian, or Lebanese, I'm going to go with... I might even go with Persian, I really like Turkish food. I'm a big fan of Turkish food. Massive fan. I always tell people, if you live in London or you visit London and you're not sure what to get, if you're eating out or getting takeaway, find your local boss man. Turkish place. There's plenty of good Turkish. There are some rubbish Turkish places in London for sure, rubbish kebab shops. But go to a good one that at least looks nice and clean and all that. You know, check on whatever it is, Google for the ratings and all that type of stuff. And go see the Turkish boss, man. He will sort you out. Yeah. So I do love Turkish food, but Persian food is also levels. If you go to a good Persian place, it's levels, bro. It's levels with that grill. Matt said, okay, yeah. Talk about the freedoms. You know, one of the scary things with the law in the United States is the 3-strike rule. The 3-strike rule is crazy. How many of you guys know about the 3-strike rule? That's where if you get convicted on 3 relatively minor charges, they can hit you with some crazy sentence after that. I'm talking about decades in prison. Okay, so they're kind of phasing out the 3-strike rule, Matt says. The 3-strike rule is only in 3 states at this point. But that's one of the most draconian things ever. It's the 3-strike. I mean, that's crazy. That 3-strike rule, crazy. Yeah, like drugs and so on. It could be 3 relatively minor crimes and then they're sending you away for decades. What a madness. Which administration brought that in? Was it Reagan? When did the 3-strike... Which president did the 3-strike rule come in under? Because it was mad. And also in the United States, I don't think they do it so much these days, but a couple decades back, they would literally put minors inside adult prisons. I'm talking about teenage boys under the age of 18 would be sent into adult prisons. I mean, in fact, Fleece Johnson was one of them. You know, the booty warrior Fleece Johnson, he was sent to an adult prison when he was like 15 or 16 or something, or maybe 16, very young age. And he spent 40 years in prison. He went in when he was a teenager. And I've said in a previous stream that the electric chair is without a shadow of a doubt one of the most barbaric methods of capital punishment that has ever been invented in the history of mankind. Absolutely barbaric, disgusting. I'm not saying it's the worst. You know, being hung, drawn, and quartered is no cakewalk, is it? But the electric chair is still totally barbaric. I mean, you would choose firing squad over the electric chair 10 times out of 10. Good God, man. What a sadistic thing. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, the one thing that is not fabricated about the American incarceration system is the violence and SA, yet no attempts are made to fix it. Obviously, the prison systems in different states are different and whatnot, and I'm sure some states are worse than others. But some of these booty warriors like Fleece Johnson and a few others say that the essays in some of those American jails are not as prevalent as they used to be. But there's certainly still a lot of it, right? And as bad as American prisons are, and American prisons are very bad. American prisons, I have to imagine, are by far the most violent and horrific prisons out of any Western country, for sure. But Mexicans who get incarcerated, I'm talking about people that were born and raised in Mexico, you know, like criminals who went to prison in Mexico. They say that the American, you know, by their standards, you know, after being to Mexican prisons, they say that American prisons are like a holiday camp. Which puts into perspective how unbelievably horrendous Mexican prisons must be. If these criminals from Mexico think American prisons are like after experiencing American prison, they're saying it's like a holiday camp in comparison. Good God, man, you would not want to be inside a Mexican prison. You would not want to be inside a Mexican prison, bro. Shout out to Matt. He says, also, death row in general is a sadistic method. I agree with you on that. That shouldn't exist. If you put someone to death, just get it done 100%. Because you're prolonging the suffering. I completely agree with you. It is sick. It's sadistic. To prolong their suffering, never knowing when their time's going to come. Yeah, it's sick doing all that. You're going to put them to death, just get it done. It's clearly intentional to torture the inmate of waiting for the inevitable scenario. Yeah, you're just living in anguish for the rest of your miserable life inside that penitentiary. I completely agree with you. It is a sadistic thing. It's a sadistic thing. You know, I remember there was I think he was a Pakistani guy who either he was born in Britain or he was a British citizen by naturalization. I forget which. But I'm sure he was Pakistani rather than Indian. And he ended up going to visit Pakistan. And he caught a body over there. Okay? But the body he caught over there was when he was taking a cab. And the cab driver, bizarrely, tried to grape him. Yeah, the cab driver tried to SA him. And so he got into this altercation with a cab driver who was trying to, you know, take his booty. And he ended up done in the cab driver's dance, right? He done his dance. He put the cab driver 6 feet deep. And he got put on death row in Pakistan, right? And anyway, after years of his family campaigning, he was on death row in Pakistan. In Pakistan, I think they hang you. So they were doing hanging. And after years of, I think it might have been 10 years on death row or something. I think he went into prison in Pakistan when he was like 18. And when he came out, he was 30. And all of his hair had turned white by the age of 30. All of it. Because of being in this perpetual state of not knowing when his life would end, you know? The stress, and I'm sure Pakistani prisons are disgusting. So the stress and the trauma and all that type of stuff of whatever it was, 12 years on death row. He came out at the age of 30 because his conviction was quashed or overturned. I think the British government might have got involved, maybe. But his family certainly campaigned for a long time. And when he came out at the age of 30, man's hair had all turned white. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, honestly, call me wild for this, but basically the guillotine is the least painful way to go. Bring it back, it's cheap. Let the family funeral pay. Yeah, it's certainly a lot better than the electric chair, I'll tell you that. I would agree it's better than the electric chair. It's better than hanging. More humane. It's obviously bloody and grisly, but in terms of the least amount of suffering, it probably is one of the more humane ones. But I would say firing squad, which they do still use in a lot of countries. They still use firing squad. I think there are some states in America where you can request firing squad, because there was one incident over the past couple of years, because you can now, if a state has different methods of execution, a lot of times these guys are allowed to choose. And in one of these states, I remember sometime over the past couple of years, a guy had a choice between, I think it was gas chamber, electric chair, or firing squad, and he chose firing squad. And in many countries around the world, that's what they use, is firing squad. And it's several marksmen and they all aim for your heart. So it's not like one marksman, it's like several of them. And there's like a target where your heart is and they all aim there. And they done your dance in a matter of seconds. Cash Machine says Lee Murray is in Moroccan prison for nearly 20 years now. He got extended because he tried to escape. Yeah. I looked that up after somebody else mentioned it. I knew he was in prison, but the escape thing and then getting time added on, I didn't realize that until somebody mentioned it in the previous stream. Shout out to Robert. He says, fun times in here tonight. I know. Discussing these macabre subjects. Yes, very macabre. Matt says, usually the richest countries have the wildest prison systems. I wouldn't agree with that. I would say America's kind of an anomaly in that regard. America has a bad, really bad prisons. But most of the West, prisons are chill compared to poor countries. You don't go to a trust me, even in Costa Rica, which is not the most violent place in Latin America, you don't want to go to prison in Costa Rica, bro. Trust me. It's, of course, in developing countries, it isn't just the violence, it's the unsanitary conditions. Yeah. In a lot of these developing countries, you can die from dysentery in prison. You can die from all kind of diseases because it's so insanitary. The prisons are disgustingly filthy. Yeah, that's true. That's one thing about American culture you say there, Matt. Americans are cold-hearted when it comes to things like that. I was always very disturbed back in the 1980s and 90s when you would have these criminals, even though these criminals in many cases were evil people, serial killers and stuff. I was always very disturbed by the fact that, especially in the South, on the day of execution, a crowd would gather outside the prison and they would start taunting, saying, oh, you're going to fry and all this type of business. And a lot of these people that would turn up to do that had no connection to the victims of the individual at all. Do you know what I mean? But they would turn up to taunt and goad the person. Haha, your eyeballs are going to pop out your head and all this type of weird, sadistic stuff. I always found that really disturbing, I found that really disturbing. Shout out to Matt. He says, yo, if you saw the state of my work office, I'm surprised I haven't gone to the holy man from dysentery yet. Afro Jam says, this is old traditions. Yeah, going back to the days of slavery when they were lynching people and all that, you'd often get a crowd cheering and taunting the condemned individual while they were being tortured to death publicly. Yep. And that has kind of lived on, particularly in the South, where they really favored the chair. And the condemned individual, to be a big crowd outside of the prison taunting him. And yeah, it's all very ugly. I never liked all that carry on. Matt says, as my father told me once, the American mind is old-fashioned in a modernized way. Well, because it's a new nation, isn't it? It's like the movie The Birth of a Nation. Most nations are born from turmoil and war, right? Most nations are created out of warfare. And the younger the nation is, the more violent it tends to be. When a nation matures after several centuries, it's not always the case, but usually they become less violent over time as they mature and what have you. Because America is still a relatively young nation, it's still dealing with a lot of the violence, which was used to create it, you know? The energy of that, the psychology of the violence that used to create the nation is still kind of in the American psyche. Whereas Britain, which is a much older nation, has matured psychologically. Do you understand what I mean? Because it was formed so much longer ago. Although all that violence and everything is settled in Britain a long time ago in terms of the grisly stuff that used to go on. Because once upon a time, Britain was mad grisly. You know? Medieval Britain, even Renaissance Britain was, I mean, horror show stuff, horror movie stuff. Robert says, reading about the history of capital punishment is more disturbing than any horror film. Yeah, people often, when you grow up in a particular culture, sometimes you don't connect some of the traditions, or there's a disconnect between some of the celebrations and traditions and what they're based on. A shout to Matt for the super chat. He says, my favorite documentaries are ones about kings who basically become addicted to capital punishment in their own way. It's insane. Vlad the Impaler and so on. Yes, and Vlad the Impaler obviously being famous for impaling his enemies on spikes and whatnot. Bloodlust and partially the inspiration for Dracula. But, I mean, even if you look at somebody like King James, you know, the famous Scottish and later British king who commissioned the most famous version of the Bible, the KJV. Guy Fawkes, who was said to be a spy or an agent for the Vatican, for the Pope, along with his cohorts, attempted to assassinate King James by blowing up Parliament. But their plan was foiled, and they were horribly tortured, and then they were hung, drawn, and quartered, which is one of the most barbaric methods of execution that has ever been invented. I mean, the mind that must have come up with hanging, drawing, and quartering is just wild, bro. What kind of mind would come up with something like that? I'm pretty sure everyone knows what hanging, drawing, and quartering is, but in case anyone in the chat don't know what it is, it was a method of execution that became popular in Britain. Usually, it was reserved for treason, right? A punishment for treason. And you would be hung, but not so that your neck breaks. You'd be hung so that you were semi-conscious, okay? So they'd put a noose around your neck and they'd lift you off the ground, basically, until you're semi-conscious. So you'd be in agony, choking, right? But before you die, they'd bring you down. Then they'd slap water on you, wake you up. And then they would tie your arms and legs to ropes, and they would pull your arms and legs until they all dislocate. Yeah? Then they would take you down from that, and they would splay you out on a table, and they'd cut your flipping balls off and burn them in front of you. And then they would open you up very skillfully, right? They'd open up your belly and pull your intestines out while you're still alive and burn them in front of you. I mean, what? Who came up with all this? They pull your intestines and burn them in front. And this is in front of a crowd, right? Often in London, usually in London, I think these things were taking place. In Westminster, what is Westminster today? Pull your intestines out, burn them in front of you, and then finally, you'd be decapitated. And then your limbs would be sent to the four corners of Britain, and I think your head would be on a spike at the tower. I mean, just unbelievable. And in those days, on the approach into London, from the south of the river, across the bridge, they would have spikes on the bridge with people's heads on. And this is like Renaissance Britain, bro. We're talking about, 1500s, 1600s. They were still doing this crazy stuff. And hang, drawing, and quartering in Britain went on until at least the 1700s. Wild. I mean, like, wild stuff. Matt says they did that to William Wallace. That's right. They did it to William Wallace and many, many other people. You can go online and look up. It might even be on Wikipedia. They've got a list of all the people that they did that to. Hundreds of people over the centuries suffered that horrendous death. I mean, beyond horrendous, right? Flipping horrendous. What kind of person came up with that? There are some monsters in the world, bro. For a man to come up with that kind of punishment, unbelievable. Shout out to 4Fox. I've noticed that people's names have all turned normal now because YouTube wasn't displaying them properly before. But the names have all gone back to normal now. Danny says freedom. Yeah. From the Braveheart movie, Mel Gibson. Afro Jam says in Tyburn, which is now Marble Arch, that is where most of the executions took place. A lot of the executions took place in the grounds of what is now St. Paul's Cathedral, and also in the grounds of the Tower. They had a scaffold there where they would hang people, behead people, all that type of stuff. So it was all throughout the Westminster area. There were various locations in the Westminster area where they were doing these things. Guy Fawkes, I think, and his co-conspirators were executed somewhere around St. Paul's Cathedral, somewhere around that area of Westminster. Matt says, how ironic the church committed more acts of atrocity while cloaking themselves as peaceful dubs. Well, King James, innit? King James had that done to Guy Fawkes and his co-conspirators. And King James is a guy who commissioned the most famous version of the Christian Bible. How's that for a bizarre irony? You know? Christianity's all supposed to be about turning the other cheek and this, that, and the other. And Mr. King James, who's put this version of the Bible out in English, man's hanging, drawing, and quartering people. Like, what is all that about? Danny says, thoughts on Mel Gibson? Pretty good filmmaker. For me, my favorite Mel Gibson movie was Apocalypto, which is another terribly violent movie. But that's my favorite Mel Gibson movie, Apocalypto. Braveheart was good, but I like Apocalypto. Obviously, he starred in many other movies which he didn't direct or produce. Like, what's the one with Danny Glover? Oh, Lethal Weapon. Yeah, that was a good one as well, Danny. The Theory movie, that was a good one too. Jason's favorite animated film. Favorite animated film. I mean, when I was a kid, I liked, the Transformers movie. That was an animated film, but I wouldn't enjoy that now. Favorite animated film. A Scanner Darkly, I guess, is kind of animated. That's decent. Animated film. You're talking about like Disney Pixar films, kids films, or... Because growing up, I loved Disney films, The Jungle Book, Sword in the Stone, 101 Dalmatians. Fantasia was always disturbing to me as a kid. Always found that disturbing. I also found Snow White disturbing. The witch used to creep me the hell out in Snow White. Pinocchio, that's creepy as hell. Especially when you watch it now. Pinocchio's far more creepy now than it was watching it as a kid. Because it's basically about some Epstein Island type ish. Pinocchio. Mad creepy. Oh, Fist of the North Star. Yeah, I remember that. Anime from way back in the days. Who Shot Roger Rabbit? You mean Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Yeah, that was like a partially animated film, wasn't it? Jessica Rabbit was hot, though. Jessica Rabbit was a baddie. You know it's true, Danny. Jessica Rabbit was smoking. Talking about smoking, I guess you could count The Mask as maybe a partly animated movie. But in more recent times, the Matrix movies were supplemented when the box set came out. The Matrix movies were supplemented by something called the Animatrix. Anybody seen the Animatrix? The Animatrix was like a series of short stories which were animated movies, which gave you backstory about the Matrix. And it was actually really interesting, the Animatrix. Yeah, I remember Watership Down with the rabbits. Yep, I remember that. That kind of creeped me out as well as a kid. Watching Watership Down. A lot of the cartoons back then, them animated films back then, were really dark. You know? Some really dark animated films that came out of like the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, up to the 80s. Some of them were really dark films, supposedly made for kids, and you're like, huh? Like I say, going back to things like Fantasia and Snow White, they were dark, bro. But Watership Down was dark. There was one called The Secret of Nim. That was quite dark as well. The Secret of Nim was quite dark. Not as dark as some of the others I mentioned, but it was still pretty dark. Yeah, Shola says Watership Down was disturbing. Rumpelstiltskin, Hansel and Gretel. You see? There's so many sinister animated films back then which were supposedly for kids. All right, peeps, gonna turn this one in. Been streaming for 3.5 hours now. So, yeah, as always, like to shout out everyone for joining the conversation. Special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Mr. Luca, Lord McCormick, Adam, Desi, Brad, Kayvon Green, Hard Work, Ben, Warts, Matt, of course. Big up everyone who donated via Super Chat. Shout out to everyone for locking in and joining the conversation. Take care, be good. I'm trying to think of the right pilot language to use to describe this plane about to land at the destination. If you can all fasten your seatbelts. The plane is now due to descend. All right, big up. Be easy. Catch you on the next one. I'm out.